Hey guys! This is part 2 of What If Naruto Was an Introvert. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start! Chapter 6. Clearing Misconceptions in the Dark. Naruto was smiling. Sakura's eyes looked with a mixture of worry and surprise at the sight of the usually grim-looking blonde boy actually holding a lopsided small smile on his face. She didn't know what to make of it, especially considering they were dealing with garbage disposal. She grabbed her metal-pointed stick and used it to pierce through a few discarded cans, before tossing them in the nearby garbage bin, as she thought about it. Her eyes traveled once more to the blonde boy, appraising and studying him as he seemed completely ignorant of what she was doing. Sakura's eyes then met those of Sai, and she quickly went to look at the ground once more. Sai had known about Naruto being a Jinchuriki since the beginning, and somehow she felt that the death of that civilian hadn't just been something random. The man had talked to her, and someone had killed him for revealing the S-rank secret. Her throat felt parched and constricted as she shuddered. The sun was high in the sky that morning, its rays hitting on them hard. The full might of the summer seemed keen on getting them to kneel and acknowledge the thirst and the need for a good rest. The forehead protector on her head was scorching, and she had taken to moving it to her waist, just like that Ino pig had. It was, in her opinion, the only way to avoid a patch of burned hair. Sai seemed to be keeping his cool. The boy wasn't even sweating as he swept with the broom the various pieces of paper and generic rubble people were so fond on throwing everywhere, but in the trash cans. Nearby, the noises of the children playing intertwined with the soft breeze that every now and then gave the genins respite. Sakura didn't know how to broach the argument that was suddenly at the forefront of her mind, and so as her eyes traveled up to where her sensei was, she found herself biting her lower lip. The man seemed to simply pick up on it, probably her body language, and as such beckoned her closer. "What is it, Sakura?" he asked kindly, his arms crossed in front of his chest. "Sensei, what's the purpose of D-ranks?" Aoba's head moved slightly up, as if he was actually pondering on this, before returning back to stare at her. At least, she didn't know if that was true since the man was wearing sunglasses, but she could suppose he was looking at her while talking. "There's not a clear answer to that," her sensei's voice came with a toneless pitch. "Some might say it's because they're just a way to show how helpful shinobi are to the population of the village, but since everyone in the village has shinobi relatives, what's the purpose of that? Others might say that since there are few civilians, then shinobis are naturally used as workforce to do public works. Personally, I think everyone sees in D-rank missions what they want to see. Well, I know that for some shinobis, D-ranks are things they do to stave off the boredom, trying new and original ways to complete them to keep their wits sharp without actually risking a do-or-die situation on a more dangerous one," he explained calmly, bringing up his index finger as if to denote the one option. Others, here his middle finger also came up, denoting two, rather believe that D-ranks are used to unwind stressed shinobis. Collecting garbage is boring and repetitive, but at least it beats going on another assassination mission. You know, instead of having a simple downtime, you collect garbage or help a lady with her shopping. Sakura nodded at that, but then her sensei brought up his third finger. "Or it might just be a security reason," Aoba shrugged as he said that. "Having shinobis do works around the village may help in revealing foreign spies, address potential security leaks and much more. A jounin winding down with a D-rank and filtering through the garbage might find a Kiri cipher being used on a bag of chips, for example, albeit that is an extreme example." "Ah, I see." Sakura's eyes widened at those words. It did make sense. "Then there's option 4, whereas D-ranks simply are helpful to genins to learn different types of work, so that they may easily infiltrate villages," Aoba pointed out. "Or option 5 has D-ranks in place as punishment for high-ranked shinobis failing due to arrogance. Or option 6 that holds D-ranks as valuable lessons on patience." "But what's the real one?" she asked, slightly pissed now that her sensei was starting to rant. "There isn't one. Maybe it's a combination of all of them, or maybe there isn't. What you need to know is that D-ranks exist, and you are doing one now." With those words, Aoba curtly nodded to her and returned to stare ahead of him. She sheepishly went back to her job, acknowledging the closure of the argument. As she began to grab once more with the pointed stick the garbage, she realized her pile had largely diminished. She frowned at that, turning to look around for whoever cleaned her area. Her thoughts went on Sai, but they were quickly discarded when she saw the boy simply too far away. Sakura's emerald eyes then settled on Naruto, and she immediately recognized she had been right. The boy's pile had considerably grown, as if he didn't know of the word fatigue. He was panting hard and sweating profusely, But he wasn't stopping or slowing down at all. She decided she couldn't just keep on staring and do nothing. The very least she could do was thank him. So she returned to her own pile, and once she finished with her area she moved to his to help him out. Naruto tensed at her coming closer to his side of the park, but he said nothing as usual. "Naruto," she said before stopping. The boy's shoulders had frozen, as he was apparently returning to his grim face as he turned to look at her. "Naruto?" "Yes, Sakura?" he asked, trying to feign a smile. "Can I help you?" "Oh no," she answered quickly. "I wanted to thank you." The boy actually winced at that, before nervously chuckling. For what?" His voice was soft-spoken, barely a whisper as it went by. She gave him a tiny and awkward smile, before answering. "Well, you did clean a bit of my side, didn't you?" "Oh, that? That was nothing. I just thought it would be quicker that way, yeah?" He nodded to himself, before turning as if finishing the conversation. "Naruto, wait!" Sakura blurted out, and with those words she realized the boy had actually stilled. The blonde teen turned around, sporting a resigned face. "It's fine. Really, I understand. I'll change teams if that's what you want." She frowned at that, staring incredulously at the boy. "Naruto, why would I want that?" She suddenly huffed, crossing her arms around her chest. "You don't?" This time he was the one who was asking her with a surprised face. "Why would I? It's not like there's any reason, isn't there?" He chuckled grimly at her words, shaking his head before answering back. "Well, I'm not as smart as you or Sai. My taijutsu is horrendous, and I barely scraped by the exam. I don't have any clan jutsus or stuff like that, and the most I can do is clean the trash quickly." Sakura tried a small sad smile, before shaking her head. "When we had to pass the exam, it was your plan we followed, Naruto. My taijutsu is horrible too, the only thing it's good at is that it follows the book. I tire quickly and get sore real easy. You actually had to carry me through the exam." An uncomfortable silence descended between the two of them, before Sakura spoke again. I know why people hate you," she murmured. "I don't think it should change anything in the team." Naruto's eyes widened at that, before he slowly brought his gaze to the side with a grimace. "It should." Sakura shook her head strongly. "Shouldn't, should," he retorted, crossing his arms on his chest and puffing. "Shouldn't," she replied with a hint of amusement in her smile. "Should." He nodded sagely. "Should not, should too. Dickless and Cherry, the job is done." As Sai's voice piped in, Sakura embarrassedly looked away. She had entered the good-natured banter she used to have with Ino, when the two of them were still friends, with Naruto. She didn't even snap at Sai. Cherry was a fitting nickname, at least. The small banter had probably taken the little time needed for Sai to finish up his own side and the remaining bits of theirs. In the end, the park was now clean of trash, and at least for a few days it would remain as such, or so they could hope. "All right." Aoba clapped his hands, walking closer to the three of them. "Sai and Sakura, I expect you two this afternoon in Training Ground 13 for taijutsu practice." The jounin then turned to Naruto with a grim face. "I'm arranging for a teacher to take you on kenjutsu, but so far I've got little results. Still, I'm giving you the afternoon free to look around for a sword you would like to use." Naruto nodded, settling on a hesitant smile. He was sure he could find a sword, the question was if he'd like it or not. He didn't even know where to start looking for them. Probably his sensei was expecting him to go to the nearest weapon shop and ask. It was enough if the people actually let him buy things, to ask and receive back helpful tips. Now that was impossible. Still, he said nothing as he merely nodded. He was about to go his way, when the hesitant voice of Sakura stopped him. Naruto?" She hesitated, and then shook her head. "Nothing." Naruto frowned, but shrugged and went his way. He wasn't there to actually try and enter Sakura's mind. The girl hadn't wanted for him to change teams, and that was enough at the moment. He was sweaty, and he probably stank too. He went back home slowly, entering his one-room apartment and trudging to the sink. The water ran down with a slight stutter, turning brownish from the accumulated rust. A few sputters later, and it was clear. He removed his shirt and began to wash himself with a sponge for the dishes, using the liquid soap. Even the water was lukewarm, probably because of the pipes. He had barely finished washing that the water suddenly stopped. He frowned. Turning the tap's knob held no results. He shook his head before looking beneath the sink. The tube seemed intact. Naruto sighed before opening the fridge and grasping the bottle of water he had put in the night before. He drank from it 3 sips, before closing the tap and then putting the bottle back in place. The fridge was an old model, and while it did keep things cool, it didn't produce ice. Not that it would matter if water had been cut off. Still, it hadn't been cut off with him still soaked. He would have had to clean himself with the water in the fridge, and that would have been a startling way to begin the afternoon. He dried himself with a towel, before walking to his dresser to take out some clean clothes. With the heat outside, dark colors were out, so too were light ones since the sun would reflect them or make them shine out. He needed something neutral, and as such went with gray, a gray sleeveless shirt, and a pair of beige shorts. He held his wallet in his pouch, and together with his forehead protector he was ready to go outside, face the heat, and find what he had to find. He had the afternoon free. He could go and look for a sword of sorts, or he could stock up on water. The sun's glaring heat brought him to do the latter. The fact he didn't want to talk to someone who might glare at him didn't matter, of course, and as he headed outside, he went for route. It was a bit far from his apartment, and now that he was walking towards it during the day he realized there were quite a few shinobi shops before it. Late at night he hadn't probably seen any of them, but he did kind of want to talk with the old man again. He'd tell him about how Sakura didn't actually hate him for being the Jinchuriki of the Kyubi. He'd ask him if it was smart to tell Saito then, since maybe the boy wouldn't have a bad reaction. He didn't know when, in the single day he had met the old man, he had started to trust him with his thoughts. What he knew was that it didn't do him any good to keep his thoughts for himself, and sharing them with someone who understood him and could help him was better. The man was a retired shinobi, and the shop did appear to be light trafficked, so maybe he was just helping him alleviate the boredom. Retired shinobis did get a retirement pension, so the shop was probably a way to pass the time for Shimura-san. He opened the door of the shop and was suddenly inundated with the cold air of the mechanical fan. He gasped and nearly moaned in relief as he closed the door behind him. "This is heaven," he whispered to himself. A chuckle escaped from the counter, where the owner of the shop stood with a small smile. "The miracles of technology, huh?" Danzo remarked, his only eye going from him to the mechanical fan that was settled behind a stack of melting ice. The cool air was then brought forward by the wind moved by the fan, that aimed towards the counter, and the entrance was thus in the crosshair. "Hello Shimura-san," Naruto said as he walked closer to the man. "How's business? It's about to get better I suppose," Danzo said. The bandaged man brought his only sane arm on the counter. "What can I do for you, Naruto?" "Yeah, fun thing is, the water was cut off today." The boy grimly shook his head. "I don't know how long it's going to be, so I was wondering. Do you sell those big plastic tankards that you can fill with a lot of water?" The old shinobi closed his only eye, as if lost in thought, before grimacing and shaking his head. "We have bottles, but surely the lack of water won't last long. It is summer after all. They would be fools to leave without water a house for so long." "Ah, right," Naruto grimaced. "Right. Is something the problem?" "Nah. Nothing, I'm sure they'll fix the pipes in the next month." He chuckled as he said that. He knew of course that the pipes would be repaired. His section of the pipes on the other hand, he had learned to repair them by himself, but he couldn't start on them until the workers were gone. "It really shouldn't take them that long," Danzo frowned. "We are in the middle of a heat wave, Naruto. Surely you can ask to be moved to another apartment until they fix the problem?" Naruto looked towards the door, and then back to Danzo. He finally gazed at the ground silently, and hoped against all odds that the argument would be dropped. "There isn't another apartment available?" Danzo queried calmly, his voice holding an undertone of steel. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't want to be a bother." "You wouldn't be a bother. It is the Konoha Shinobi program job to make sure all of Konoha's shinobi are housed into safe lodgings with running water, electricity and gas. A shinobi is willing to sacrifice his life for Konoha. So Konoha should be willing to sacrifice a clerk's time to get you an apartment with running water." The voice of the old man was heated as he spoke. His cane furiously slammed on the ground to better deliver the argument. "And if they won't take their time, then I will." The man nodded then to the boy who had frozen in shock from his outburst. "Now go and make your plight known, Naruto. If it fails, come back here and I'll deal with it personally." The boy gulped down audibly as he turned to leave, but not before giving one last glance at the old man who was so keen on him being treated right. A single whisper escaped his lips then, so low that he doubted the man had heard, albeit he did twitch his lips as he said it. "Thanks." And then Naruto was out of the shop, headed towards the Hokage Tower. Danzo just took a single breath, and his features returned to the usual stone they were meant to be. He slowly walked towards the back room, before opening the secret door and nodding to the operative to take his place. Now the blonde boy would either go and get his apartment changed with one closer to the house of retired shinobi Danzo Shimura, or he would not go and return to him, only to be offered a place to live in the large mansion of retired but rich shinobi Danzo Shimura. Both set of papers were ready. A true shinobi planned for any possibility, accounting all that could happen in his plans. If the boy returned home, without telling him anything, he would make sure electricity to be the next thing cut, soon followed by the gas. He could play the waiting game until the boy went to hunt in the woods, and even if Naruto actually did that, he'd casually meet him and ask him how everything was going. He might even forcefully invite himself in Naruto's apartment to check, and then he would act livid and angry. It was all an act. A snare, a web of lies and deceits to constrict and trap the prey. The resources of Root were fully dedicated on this project, the most important one of all. The Jinchurikis of the village were weapons, but more than weapons they were political tools. A Hokage whose Jinchuriki didn't obey his will was useless, and far less considered for the position than one who instead had the container of the demon's aid. He could get Hiruzen to retire and, time permitting, he could place one of his own shinobis in charge of the village as a figurehead, like the Yondaime had unknowingly ended up becoming. A few hours later, Danzo was greeted with the presence of Hiruzen walking in his shop. Albeit the Sandaime Hokage's face didn't denote any external emotion, inside the old man was probably twirling with a mixture of barely repressed rage and worry. Danzo simply smiled. "Hiruzen, what can I do for you?" "Cut the chase, Danzo." The Sandaime growled lightly, showing a meager display of the shinobi skills to hold and rein in one's own emotions. "What do you think you're doing?" "Absolutely nothing. I just felt the need to do something during my retirement, can't I?" "Naruto, Danzo. What are you planning with him?" The Hokage muttered, his eyes narrowing even thinner. "The boy is just a lost lamb. Giving him a purpose in life seems nothing to worry about," the Yami of Shinobi remarked. "He is so much similar to the Yondaime that it's like looking at a ghost, you know?" Hiruzen sharply breathed in, before exhaling once. "Naruto has suffered enough, Danzo. I hope for him to have a normal childhood, and yet he didn't have one. I hope for him to be happy, and yet the most he manages is a bitter smile. Do not toy with me, old friend, because there is always a free grave in Konoha's cemetery." Danzo frowned slightly, before recomposing himself. "Death threats, Hiruzen? How the mighty have fallen," the bandaged man commented, before flicking his gaze to the door. Hiruzen tensed slightly, before bringing up a light smile. "Well then, Danzo-san, I hope your business stays afloat. Likewise, Hokage-sama, I hope your reign remains peaceful." The door finished creaking open, as Naruto walked in with a perplexed gaze. The blonde boy was looking from the Hokage to Danzo with a mixture of surprise and worry. Danzo placed a smile on his lips as the boy walked back in. "Naruto, how did it go?" he asked, kindly gazing at the boy with his only eye. "They said it won't take much to repair the pipes," Naruto answered back sheepishly, scratching the back of his head. "A few hours at most, Shimura-san." "Good to know," Danzo acknowledged. "And if it takes more, just tell me, and I'll do something about it." Well, Hiruzen had played his card to keep Naruto where he was. Still, the look of regret on the Sandaime's face was enough for Danzo to hold a smirk within his mind. It probably was a look of hurt hastily covered up, but not completely. "Paperwork calls," Hiruzen sighed, taking out his pipe. "Hope to see you again soon, Naruto." The boy just nodded awkwardly, before answering, "Yes, Hokage-sama." There was the tiniest bit of pain on the old man's face as he left the root shop, that Danzo had no doubts. Naruto Uzumaki was the Sandaime's weakness all right. Yet he knew he had to tread carefully. If there was one thing he knew of Hiruzen, it was that he wasn't an opponent to underestimate. He had expected him to catch up on his plan at least one day earlier, but evidently the workload of the Hokage had made him falter and inattentive. The small window of free time had been enough, however, and now the Hokage had no choice but to live with Danzo being a part of Naruto's life. "Nay, Shimura-san?" Naruto asked after a few minutes of silence. "Do you know where I can buy a sword?" "A sword?" Danzo asked back curiously. "What sword? A katana?" "You're a shinobi, katanas are for samurais." "I'm starting kenjutsu," Naruto replied, looking down on the ground. "Sensei's teaching my teammates taijutsu, but mine is so horrible there's no way I could get on par with them, so he had me look for a sword. If it's a replacement to taijutsu, it makes sense to have a short blade, like a tanto. Tantojutsu is an adequate substitute to taijutsu, albeit a kaiken would work the same way." Danzo's face turned thoughtful for a second, before he eyed carefully the boy. "What's a kaiken?" Naruto asked, perplexed. "Aren't swords just that?" "Swords?" Danzo chuckled lightly. "If swords were just swords, then tell me, what do you make of the Raijin no Ken?" "But that's the Nidaime Hokage's sword, it is special." "Yes it is, but did you know he never used it during most of his missions?" As Danzo said that, the boy frowned. "Why wouldn't he?" The sword was said to be able to splice through mountains. It made the user invincible too. It was noisy and flashy, and it was the reason his hair was always frizzed upwards instead of down like his brother's, Danzo remarked. The Nidaime Hokage was far quieter than Hashirama, and he preferred the use of simpler weapons, like the Kaiken. What's the Kaiken then? Naruto asked, curious as what weapon the second Hokage could prefer. It made some sort of sense, not to use a flashy weapon when doing some missions, but in battle shouldn't the strongest used weapon simply win? It's a dagger, sometimes two-bladed and other times not. It is usually used for ritualistic suicides, but its strength lies in its simplicity. It's nothing more than a blade 8 to 10 inch long. The benefit is that it can be easily used indoors, where a katana or a wakizashi are instead cumbersome. Danzo then looked down at the boy with an appraising look, before adding, "What you need, however, is a yoroi toshi." The old man turned around, rummaging beneath the counter until he came out with a black sheath. The dark purple handle of the sword held a small shuriken-shaped symbol, as twin straps seemed knotted together to form a loose circle of cloth that probably made it possible to twirl the weapon. It looked like a tanto 7-inch long, but its blade was probably half an inch thick. Danzo unsheathed it gently and with the utmost care, and as Naruto looked the boy saw that the blade seemed reinforced with linings of steel and iron. It was stockier than a normal tanto, but it did seem as if it was also sturdier than one. The blade is reinforced with chakra metal, to make it easier for the shinobi to use it, Danzo admitted. This blade helped me through quite some tight situations during the war. While running through the earth tunnels of IWA, for example, it excelled in attacking on close quarters and range. It is also known as an armor cutter, because its thickness guarantees it will not snap against enemy armor. Even samurai's plates are easy to pierce with this. Naruto's eyes widened as he admired the craftsmanship. There wasn't a single decorative figure or image, and the handle itself appeared worn out from excessive use. The handle was dark blue when I first wielded it. It became dark purple from the blood of Konoha's enemies that dripped onto it. Naruto winced and gulped down anxiously as he reverently looked at the small sword. It was so small, and yet it had apparently killed a lot, if the deep purple color of the handle was of any indication. In the right hands, any weapon is lethal, Naruto. This sword isn't made for shows of swordsmanship or for complex moves. There is no such thing as special actions or super moves. Danzo's voice lowered itself to a threatening level. I feel the need to retch when I see young shinobi run around screaming their cool moves like that meant something. This blade pierces. This blade stabs. This blade kills. There are not katas or any wish-wash imbecilic idea behind them. There is no form other than that which works. This blade works. Do we understand each other, Naruto? The boy's face was now frightened as he looked from the blade to Danzo and back. It was as if he feared he would use the blade on him to show him what he meant. He might have laid it thickly, but it was important the message went across. Yes, Shimura-san. You may call me Shimura-sensei, Naruto, Danzo replied calmly as he sheathed the blade again, before pushing it forward to where Naruto was looking now with his mouth hanging open. Tell your Jounin-sensei that I will teach you Kenjutsu. I do not believe he will have anything to say against it. How be but, the sword is, as Naruto spluttered, Danzo merely put up a light grin. Listen to me, Naruto. I have no children, and these wounds prevented me from becoming an active shinobi-sensei. But that doesn't mean I cannot teach someone else. If by teaching you, my legacy will continue on the world, then so be it. Who better than you after all? You sacrificed your childhood, hated by all, and yet you still continue to fight to become a worthy shinobi of Konoha. I sacrificed my body for the will of Konoha, and here I am, ready to pass down my knowledge to the next generation, albeit I probably skip someone to reach to you. Danzo's eye settled on Naruto one last time, and he saw the tears leaking down from the boy's face. Had he really overwhelmed the boy with such words? He stood up and then, with his only working hand, at least publicly, he patted the boy's head, ruffling his hair. And as the boy cried, Danzo smiled to himself. The Jinchuriki was his to train and mold now. Sakura woke up the next day expecting another easy D rank. She hadn't expected to have her road outside stopped by her mother and father, however, and that brought her to pause and look at the two of them with curiosity. Her parents usually were out of the house since the early hours of the day, so for them to have remained beyond normal and actually waiting for her was something surprising. Sakura, her father began with his usual comical voice. We have to talk. Dad? Sakura dear, could you please listen to us carefully? Her mother said, worry clearly showing on her face. Mom, you're scaring me. The pink-haired girl whispered, as her gaze fell on her parents. We decided you could go to the academy and become a kunoichi, Sakura, Because we trusted you to be serious about this," her father said, his gaze turning hard and his arms crossed around his chest. "We expected you to be the best, and only if you were the best we would have allowed you to continue. You were always first in class, and that was enough." Her mother spoke afterwards, her eyes traveling up and down her, as if she was some sort of slab of meat for the butcher. "But now you dare not to tell us you've been teammates with the Kyubi. That is something we can't tolerate, Sakura," her father yelled, pointing his finger at her. "Your grandparents died because of that beast. And you dare talk to him? Have you no shame, child?" "Maybe he's corrupting you," her mother whispered. "Maybe you're being tainted. We should have you cleansed, I suppose. Fire should work." She didn't know when the entranceway morphed into a bundle of chains, constricting her, as she was pushed forward by her parents against the open oven of her father's bakery. "No! Please, it's not!" And then she screamed herself awake, the sheets of her bed on the floor, as she looked around fretfully. Her breathing was ragged, but as her eyes finally adjusted to the light around her, she took a deep, calming breath. It had been a nightmare. Her parents were always out for work early with her father's bakery, so she had yet to tell either of them of her teammates, or team number. Their usual mean of communication was through post-its attached to the fridge with magnets. She shook her head as the last remnants of sleep departed her, clearing her head. Really, throwing her in an oven? Fire purifying her? What had she eaten the night before? Oh right, she hadn't. She was fasting to get slim enough for Sasuke. Her stomach grumbled, as she held her arms around it. She clenched her teeth as she showered and dressed up, before settling an eye on the kitchen. Of course there was the bread of the day before waiting for her. She grumbled as she took it and placed it in her backpack. She could give this to the birds of the park, if they passed by there, and if they didn't then she'd grab a few handful with water when she became hungrier. She slipped in her shinobi sandals, and then walked outside. The village was as peaceful as ever as she began her stroll towards the Hokage Tower. As she went by and waved to the various friends of her family and her along the road, she couldn't help but wonder why she hadn't gathered enough courage to ask Naruto the question that plagued her mind. What is it like to have the Kyubi sealed into you? The question was a bit insensitive, but she was honestly curious. The Kyubi had been as big as a mountain, and extremely powerful. The Yondaime Hokage had died to seal him, and that man had literally torn apart a battlefield against the Iwagakure forces in less than a second. It was as she neared the entrance to the tower that she realized she had been early. Sa was nowhere to be seen, and neither was their sensei. The nightmare had probably given her a false sense of time, and she hadn't bothered to check the clock. She plopped down on the bench near the door, her gaze up to stare at the white clouds lazily going around, when a startled O caught her attention. She turned to her side and widened her eyes slightly. Naruto had apparently been sitting on the bench since the beginning, but she hadn't bothered to check on him for a simple reason. His blonde hair, the sun-kissed blonde hair that so easily identified him as her teammate, was gone. Black replaced it. Just as black was the sheath of the sword he seemed to be carrying on his side. "Naruto? Sakura, your hair is... dyed it." His reply was curt, and filled with embarrassment. "Black is easier to hide in shadows, blonde just glints." "Ah," she meekly nodded. Her gaze went to her own hair. Her long, bright pink hair, could she do the same actually? Ino had blonde hair, and she hadn't dyed it at all, so why would she do the same? And Sasuke hated girls with raven hair. He had told so the unfortunate bitch who had tried to color her hair as a future Mrs. Uchiha. "Listen, Naruto," she said after a moment, "can I ask you a question?" He frowned, but nodded a moment later. She was about to ask him of the Kyubi, when she stilled with her mouth half open. She couldn't ask that in public. What if somebody heard and then killed her because of it? "What is it like to have no parents?" She blurted out, and mentally decided that bashing her own head against the wall would be mild, in comparison to the look of her Naruto was currently displaying to her. Yet the boy smiled hesitantly to her, a smile that looked more a mixture of pain and grimace than an actual smile. A smile that actually made her twist her insides as she realized just what utter idiocy she had asked. "I live on," the boy whispered before averting his gaze. "I'm sorry," she blurted out a moment after. "I didn't mean to. Can we talk about something else, please?" He whispered back, his voice cracking. Sakura's face displayed her misery, as she felt wretched for what she had done. Instead of talking about something else, however, they both lapsed into silence, with only the light summer breeze to make a noise around them. Really, what a great teammate she was. No wonder her sensei had wanted to fail her. With that in her mind, she didn't notice the shadow looming over her until a moment too late, when a haughty voice began to speak. "My! If it isn't the big forehead!" And with those words, Sakura's attention snapped up to stare at Ami looking down on her, flanked by both Sasuke and Kiba. Sakura mentally groaned. What else could go wrong that day? Chapter 7. Finding the darkness in the smiles. Ami felt good in putting Sakura down to her place in the ground. She was the one who had been chosen to go with Sasuke-kun's team, and she was the one who got him most of the day. The only thing Sakura had were the nearly dead last and some freak guy she hadn't even heard about. Plus they had been Team 13. Didn't they know that said team had never passed once in the last years? That was the team for the failures, the not dead last but average civilian folks who would end up being sent back home or to repeat the academy. She smirked as she saw the girl wince. It felt good to prove one's own superiority against another. Sasuke, a dark-haired boy, spoke next to the pink-haired girl, acknowledging her Sasuke-kun with a light nod. Naruto, Sasuke answered back with his usual, very cool of course, dark and throaty tone. She narrowed her eyes at that. Sasuke never talked to her, and had yet to even say her name. The most she got out of him were grunts, and even if she could keep on taking for a long while, eventually grunts didn't give much conversational material. Changed your hair, Naruto? Did you become a fan of the almighty Uchiha too? Kiba yelled next to her, nearly busting her eardrums with that. The Inuzuka always had to rant and yell about her Sasuke-kun, never keeping quiet. Kiba, Naruto nodded to him. He didn't say another word, and Kiba's crest lowered a second later. The Inuzuka had known Naruto for as long as they had gone to the academy, but once Tsuchi had died, he had stopped rising to the baits of the dog user. That actually ended the discussions between the two. Sasuke-kun must be tired to hear your screeching voice every day, Sakura retorted hotly. Naruto looked towards Sasuke with amusement. This was the usual and very familiar scene he had grown accustomed to in the academy. Girls fought over him, and he looked away. He knew of course why the boy didn't simply say no. He had already tried once, and that had just brought the girls to try harder. Hard to get heirs of a noble clan like the Uchiha just added more spice to an already rich plate. Sometimes he wondered why nobody had already raped the Uchiha. Probably because they never got him alone in a dark corner. Anyway, where is your sensei? Do you even have one, or are you in the genin pool like all the losers? Ami's sharp voice made Naruto wince slightly, as Sakura hotly defended herself. Of course we have a sensei. We passed the exam. I'm sure Sasuke-kun had to help you all the way. To those words, the other girl just smiled devilishly. He did carry me like a princess. Aren't you jealous? Dream on, Sakura scoffed. Her arms crossed over her chest as she puffed her cheeks and turned her head to the side. Dickless, Cherry, you are early. Sai's voice droned in, as the raven-haired and pale boy appeared from a nearby street. Kiba guffawed at the nickname. Dickless? Naruto, really? It's a nickname like any other, he shrugged. I had worse. The two girls kept on their bickering for a few more minutes, before silence finally descended once more between the two groups. What was your test? Naruto finally asked, looking at Sasuke. The other boy looked back at him, before replying. We had to get 2 bells from our sensei. Kiba's eyes actually widened. The prick answered to what Naruto was asking? What the hell? He had tried for days, and all he had gotten was just words like dog breath or waste of space and similar. It had to be some sort of brood bond. As long as you brooded, you could talk to one another with ease. What the foo, Kiba? Language in front of a lady. Ami chided the Inuzuka, who just winced slightly. You? Sasuke asked back, his thoughts held to himself. He didn't dislike the blonde, Raven actually, now. The first years of academy, the boy had been a nuisance, a troublemaker, and frankly he had been something of a dope. One day then, it had all changed. He had been absent for a week, and the day he had come back to class he had practically missed him. Hadn't it been for Iruka-sensei calling his name, he would never have compared the dull-colored boy that was sitting in the back rows with the same Naruto Uzumaki of the week before. That had interested him long enough to see his eyes, and he knew that gaze. He had known that gaze for a long time, always looking back at him in the mirror. It was the same pain as him. The boy had lost somebody dear to him, and he had known that. He barely felt it, but with his silence and his keen desire to work there had been some sort of kinship, if such could be the word. He hadn't approached him, and he hadn't approached back. There had just been an understanding somewhere along the years. That understanding had morphed in, if not respect, at least not annoyance. Infiltration of bandit camp and retrieval of fake wounded sensei, Naruto droned, his eyes glazing over. After leaving us in the middle of nowhere. Killed anyone? Sasuke asked, and in that moment a look of hurt did not pass by unnoticed on the once blond boy. I thought I had. His whisper was barely hearable by the Uchiha, but he did hear it nevertheless. Just like the gulped-down anxiousness of the Uzumaki. He didn't pry anymore. He knew when an argument was a sore topic, differently from the Inuzuka who seemed to be intent on plowing through. It was the hurt look on the pink-haired banshee. Was it Sakura her name? That made Sasuke perplexed. Hadn't he told his teammates? He probably hadn't, judging by how stricken the girl looked. Naruto just winced slightly, his eyes upwards now to stare at the clouds. He didn't even know why he had told Sasuke. Probably because the boy knew to keep quiet? Yet, he had told within the earshot of the others, and frankly, he didn't like it one bit. He had felt it so real, the coppery scent of blood as his kunai sliced through the throat of the bandit. It had been an accident. He had infiltrated from the side of the camp. The bandit had been just there, beneath him. He hadn't had much of a choice. He had swallowed his anxiety and stress, and then he had silently made his way down. He had the signs of the handle of the kunai on his hand. By the time he was close enough to whip the ninja wire around the man's throat and constrict it, he had pulled him down and then pierced with his kunai the man's throat. Blood had gushed out, literally drenching him in the crimson liquid. He had felt it. He had smelled the liquid that tasted like copper and had seen the corpse lose control of its bowels. He had seen it all, and he had felt the need to retch. He hadn't. He had taken the wire back and he had moved on, feeling dirty for all the blood sprayed on him. He had settled the wire, the explosive tags, and the smoke bombs that Sai somehow had in his backpack. He had generated enough chaos to attract most of the camp, and just like that he had managed the most difficult part of the ploy. Sakura couldn't see him act since there was the large wooden barrack between her point of lookout and his. He could have died any moment, or so he had believed at the time, and that had actually brought him to slice that throat. It had been ruthless. He had dreamed of it for nights, even when he kept repeating to himself that it had all been a dream. He didn't know how to work his mess out, because really, how could he go to the Hokage and tell him he didn't want to be a ninja at all? He didn't want to kill, he didn't want to die. It wasn't cowardice, just, why did he have to defend the people of Konoha, when they had rather a bad word for him than a good one? Why did he have to bleed for them, when all he got were stares and glares? He was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, he had the demon beast sealed within him. Couldn't they just give him a stipend for being a jailer and let him be? He couldn't enter the civilian life, people would just never give him a chance. He was a shinobi to pay his bills and food, and now he had people who actually wanted to teach him. He had cried of joy when Danzo had helped him. The old man was probably one of the few who knew and didn't resent him. The bandaged shinobi had even offered to teach him, of all people, about kenjutsu. He was going to learn from a retired shinobi who had fought in the war, and the man had entrusted him with his own sword. How could he just go and say he didn't want that? He couldn't. He would have liked to, but he could not. People had expectations for him, and he had to satisfy them. He didn't have much of a choice on the matter. With his luck, even if he did try to make a runner, someone would find him the split second he took a step outside the village. He sighed in relief at the sight of their sensei arriving, preventing any type of inquisition on his feelings. The man was honest at least. He didn't know whether he hated him or not, but one thing he was happy about was the honesty he held. Aoba-sensei didn't lie, or if he did, he hid it well. You three waiting for Kakashi? Aoba asked, eyeing the three genins that didn't belong to his group. As Kiba answered with a boisterous yeah, their Jounin-sensei grimaced slightly before adding, good luck with that. As they stepped inside the Hokage tower, heading for the mission office, Naruto spoke. Sensei? I found a kenjutsu teacher and a sword. Aoba just nodded before replying. Who is he? And what weapon did you choose? Shimura Danzo-sensei. I will learn how to use a tanto. Dickless can spar with me then, once he learns something. Sai's words came the next second, as their sensei just brought his right hand to his chin for a moment, before nodding. Well, I suppose it will do. Silently, they entered the mission office, and as one of the Chunins assigned handed over another D rank, Sakura felt there was something wrong. She couldn't pinpoint it. She couldn't even understand what it was, but there was something extremely wrong going on. Was it the fact that her sensei hadn't asked for more? Or the fact that Naruto, of all people, had found a teacher? He was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. That didn't change anything to her, but the rest of the village? She knew how they glared at him, so how could he find a teacher so quickly, and so easily? He couldn't. Sakura was sure that it wasn't just a coincidence that he had begun training with the tanto, the the same weapon as Sai. Why her sensei wasn't saying anything was puzzling, but it wasn't what truly bothered Sakura. She had to know how Naruto managed to talk with Sasuke. If she managed that, then Amibich wouldn't even be a bother at all. She would ask him during their current D-rank mission. What was it anyway? Today's duty is street sweeping and garbage division near the market. She mentally winced. Really? That had to be one of the most horrible jobs ever. It would give her enough time to talk with Naruto, she supposed. Truth be told, it didn't. Naruto was more of a ghost than a living being all throughout the morning. He was jittery and nervous, and somehow his eyes refused to even stare in a corner of the market. There was a grocery store that held the sigils of closure on them, and while the others were all opening up in the early hours, that one remained close. She was wondering what the deal was, when finally a man limped with his cane towards the metallic grate of his shop. His face was covered in heavy bandages, and half his left arm had been removed. She didn't know why that man traumatized Naruto, but it was clear there had to be a story, especially since the now Raven boy had stopped gazing at the store as soon as the man had entered it. Naruto held a mystery, and she was going to find out what it was. Once she did, she'd hopefully find out what had he able to speak with Sasuke-kun. The moment their D-rank was finished, she was about to open her mouth to call Naruto, when the boy all but dashed away. She stood there with her mouth half open, before a nervous tick mark formed on her forehead. Sensei? She asked sweetly, her gaze falling on her jounin who was still lingering close by. Yes, Sakura? Where does Naruto live? I have to drop off something of his. It was a little white lie. She doubted it would be much of a problem for her sensei to tell her, and yet she saw him frown for a moment. Sakura, are you and Naruto together? Her mouth widened in shock as she paled. What? No. I love Sasuke-kun. There's no way I'd fall in love with. It's not a matter of love or not, Aoba remarked calmly. It's a matter of the team's inner working. Couples cannot be on 3-member teams, nor can they be assigned to the same missions or to missions in the same areas. Relationships within a team must be made manifest immediately. Do you know why? She blinked. She didn't actually think about that. Because it poses a safety risk? Indeed. A couple tends to naturally worry about one another, thus failing to take into account the other members of the team. Chunin squads composed of 4 or more individuals can easily overcome this problem, but Genin teams or Chunin-led teams of 3 cannot. It also makes it more difficult to train a team when there's a working couple within it, since it distracts both from achieving their full potential. She actually smiled at that. That meant that if Amibich managed to make Sasuke-kun fall for her, they'd have to swap the team's kunoichi? Then she would end up with Sasuke-kun. Or maybe they could swap Sai with Sasuke-kun. Then she would use Naruto's help to get Sasuke to talk to her, and finally she would conquer his heart. They would then go on Chunin missions together, and finally have many babies. She was actually chuckling with glee and a maniacal glee in her eyes, as a slight nosebleed fell from her nose. Sensei, Cherry is scaring me, Sai remarked with his usual monotone, albeit he was inching a bit further away from the girl. Somehow, while Aoba didn't voice out loud the same thought of his student, he believed it too. Naruto meanwhile settled himself on his usual seat on the corner of Ichiraku's. He eyed with a hesitant gaze Ayam, but it was Ayam's boyfriend who served him. Naruto! What can I get you? Mizuki smiled at him, and he hesitantly smiled back. Pork noodles? He asked more than ordering it. Coming right up. Ayam's voice came from the other side of the stall. So, enjoying your D-ranks? Mizuki asked him, his face still plastering a smile. Oh yeah, Mizuki-sensei, he answered back with a nod while splitting the chopsticks. The man had actually made him pass his exam, so he supposed he should be thankful about it. They're all right. Just you wait until your first C-rank, the man said with a knowing nod. The kitty gloves come off for those. I suppose they do. Naruto squirmed on his seat, his gaze down on the wooden counter. A few minutes passed by in meaningless chatter, before his order came to him. He began to eat in silence. The taste of the pork buns was slightly spicy, as if somebody had placed something else on it rather than just pork. The noodles tasted a bit thickly too, but maybe it was just the type of plate. He drank from the provided bottle of water, and frowned for a second. It had probably been poorly washed since it still tasted of the cleaning soap. He didn't bother with asking another. The spiciness was burning away at his tongue already, and with that there was no way he would keep on tasting the water any differently. He paid after his meal and began to walk away, feeling slightly unsatisfied but not wanting to linger any longer. He hated going around the civilian sector, and that morning reminded him too much of that night. It was meant to be a harmless prank. Why did he have to play pranks? They hurt people. No wonder people hated him. If only he could go back and change. But he couldn't, and so he had no choice but to go forth with what he had. He missed a step and stuttered along the road, holding his stomach a second later. He felt woozy and cold, yet at the same time his throat was parched and his eyes dry. He blinked, realizing he was losing focus of the road ahead of him. There was a bench nearby. He could lie down in there, just for a minute. Maybe it would be just a minute. He hoped he wouldn't be late for Shimura-sensei's first lesson. It wouldn't do. Naruto closes his eyes as he fell on the bench, rather than just lay down on it. His breathing grew uneven for a moment, before it finally settled down to a near halt. In his mind, Naruto Uzumaki opened his eyes to giant bars and a humongous fox, which seemed to be standing down with its paws on the ground used to lift its head. "Hello?" The fox spoke clearly. Its voice didn't boom, or resound across the sewer as if it came from a titanic creature. It seemed more like the soft-spoken voice of a kind creature, some sort of sage-like entity or god. It eyed him with its crimson orbs, and seemed to be giving him an awry smile. "Ah," he muttered back. He had to blink. He didn't actually expect this. He frowned as he realized the gates were held close by a paper sigil holding a complex seal on it. "You're the Kyuubi?" "My name is Kurama," the fox spoke calmly. "And yes, I do have 9 tails." Naruto blinked again. "Are you surprised?" the fox asked. "Did you not come here to meet me?" "Well, no," Naruto frowned. "You didn't call me here?" "I felt like hell before, but now I feel fine." The boy opened and closed his right hand, while staring at it. Puzzlement was clearly etched on his face. "We are in your mind," Kurama said. "Here, nothing can hurt you, except memories." Naruto winced, but then settled for looking around. "Why is it a sewer?" "It is dark, cramped, and easily forgotten," the fox replied. "And the fact that I may know fire affinity might have contributed to this. Earth and water are both strong against my element. The 4th Hokage did all this in my mind?" "No, he didn't," Kurama chuckled. "The Shinigami did, and in exchange the Hokage is forced to battle for all eternity my in half." Naruto grimaced, before finally settling his eyes once more on the fox. "You don't seem evil." "I never said I was, did I?" Kurama moved its head to the side, but sometimes, intentions are misinterpreted. "What do you mean with that?" "I can sense evil intent wherever it is," the fox murmured. "I know where evil gathers and lurks. So I drift towards it in an effort to battle it. However, to the outsider, I am just a giant monster who relishes in destroying cities and villages, no matter the coves of evil that lurk within them. And when I try and talk, then they attack me first." The fox shook its head, one of its paws scratching the back of her ear like a dog would. "You are the first who let me talk this much, and for that I thank you." "What do you mean?" The fox looked at him with curiosity. "You were not told?" "Told what? Your mother didn't tell you anything?" My mother's dead," Naruto whispered, his eyes down on the water surface. "Ah, I see." The Kyuubi actually nodded slowly, before adding, "Would you like to meet your father then?" Naruto's eyes widened at that. "I said, would you like to meet your father then?" "My father's dead," he hotly exclaimed. "There's no way I could meet him without dying." "Normally that would be the case," the Kyuubi acknowledged. Somehow, Naruto couldn't see the giant fox as something hostile. Maybe it was just the complete look of disinterest, or maybe it was the fact that its voice seemed more old than menacing, or maybe it was just a combination of all of it, but the Kyuubi didn't look at all how he had been portrayed, but he placed the counter seal, right on the seal. The fox wistfully replied, its snout pointed towards it. "You don't have to take my words at face value. Study the seal carefully, and then see if these symbols here are for a counter. If they are, I told you the truth. Trying to remove the seal will free a chakra transposition of your father, who apparently wanted to tell you something in the event I was about to break free." "Why are you telling me this?" Naruto finally whispered. "You're the Kyuubi. I mean, aren't you meant to be evil and all destroy Konoha, and be a demon and so on?" Kurama merely put up a sad face. The fox then took a deep breath and sighed. The hot breath actually caused ripples in the water, as it reached him and went by. "When I was first sealed, the fault lay in Madara Uchiha." The Kyuubi's voice was thick as it seemed to be remembering faraway thoughts. "Mito Uzumaki, the first Jinchuriki, did not believe my own pleads of innocence." The fox's eyes grew softer as it spoke. "The second Jinchuriki, she was your mother. She too did not believe my innocence, nor did she even allow me to speak. Do you know the most horrible feeling in the world, Naruto Uzumaki? It is to scream your innocence against an empty room, while you stand chained and bound in a cage from which there is no exit, forever entrapped and forever forced to be nothing more than a slave to the whims of another." Would you know how that feels, Naruto? It feels like hell. I will forever remember the words of those two. It is better if you stay down here. Forever forgotten was always their message. The fox slowly stood on its legs. Do I not have the right of freedom? Am I always forced down, shackled as a slave? Answer me this, Naruto. Do I not have the right to be free? To roam the worlds as I did in the past? I was sworn to my duty by the sage of the six paths. The shinobi should aid me, not try and capture me for their purposes. The voice then lowered itself a moment after, the fox shaking its head as it stared at him. I do not ask you to free me. Your answer will be the same as that of those before you. I cannot. The village needs you, or your power will only bring hatred in the world, or with you at bay, no war will ever be unleashed. I am nothing more than a weapon now, Naruto Uzumaki. And by that extension, the Kyuubi smiled bitterly. You are one too. For I am shackled to Konoha, and so are you. For I am shackled to you, as you are to me. You are no longer a person, Naruto, as I never was considered a real being. Only a mass of chakra, incomplete, was what I was referred as. The Kyuubi shook its head, pathetical. It growled before he returned down in his rest position. If it can be of any help, Naruto, you will die because of poisons in the next hours, unless you reach a hospital and are treated. I do not care about your death should you choose to linger on the bench. Eventually I will reform. It is painful, I must admit, but it is better than this. And then Naruto blinked as he looked around the sewer. How do I get out? He asked wearily. That is for you to find out, the Kyuubi remarked calmly, closing its eyes. Time here stretches for a while, not much, but enough to give you a little bit of leeway. You will die if you don't find a way out, of course, but that isn't exactly my problem, is it? Naruto spun around, clenching his fists, as he began to walk away from the fox. He had taken a few steps into the darkness that he suddenly found himself staring, once more, at the giant bars of the fox. Back again? The fox was actually taunting him now. I want to leave. Why? The fox asked. Is there something outside waiting for you? Someone who cherishes you. You know you have been poisoned, right? You ate in only one place today. The Kyuubi was snickering as it spoke. Ah, the wonders of human malice. For all the monsters that hide in the darkness, the most dangerous one lurks in the sun, humanity. Such a cradle of hatred and evil I have never seen before. Naruto closed his eyes as a silent tear trickled down his chin. I don't want to die. Why not? I want to live. Why? Because I want to. He screamed hotly at the fox. I want to eat ramen. I want to make friends. I want to fall in love. I want to laugh and to smile. And will you obtain this in Konoha? The fox asked him, a small smile settling on its giant lips. I don't know. Naruto screamed. I only know I don't want to die yet. Things are getting better. Shimura-san is teaching me. Sai doesn't hate me and neither does Sakura. I can work with them. We can be a team. Oh? The Kyuubi chuckled. Are those bonds you are thinking of, or shackles and chains? Do they clink as you look at them? Remember my words, Naruto Uzumaki. One day, you will wake up and see the truth as I see it. That day, you will realize that my words are the only truth in the world. That moment, that precise instant, you will come to me again and you will ask me set me free and I will answer you, rest assured, that to set you free you will have to pay me. Then the Kyuubi turned around, curling into itself as its 9 giant tails surrounded him. Finally, it closed its eyes. The next instant, Naruto was assaulted by pain as his entire body was racked by the poisons he had ingested. He tumbled out of the bench and on the ground, before a vile feeling settled on the back of his throat. He retched out in the corner of the bench, throwing out the sickening remains of his lunch as his stomach spasms made him wince. The pain reached him as pinpricks piercing through his skin to unload molten metal within. He was shuddering as he barely got to his feet. He wasn't that far from the hospital, he could make it. He trembled slightly as he took a few more steps, before finally falling down face first on the ground. The moment he opened his eyes again, he was in the hospital room. He turned his head to the side, holding down his throat a moan of pain for his stiff neck. There was no one in the white-walled room. He turned his gaze again towards the ceiling, and then began to count the cracks. He felt as if somebody had pounded his head with a sledgehammer, but the feeling of vomit on his tongue was an all-too-clear sensation for him. He understood what had happened then. He just didn't want to believe it. Had I poisoned him? Was that it? Did the price he paid regularly not amount to enough? Was his life what the girl wanted? He clenched his fists against the sheets of the bed. He couldn't believe that. He didn't want to believe that. He groaned as he tried to lick his lips back into some sort of wetness. He felt thirsty, and at the same time bloated. Naruto, it was his name. He blinked as he tried to focus on who was the blurry figure next to him. It was dressed in white and red, so either it was a priestess, or it was the Hokage. Hokage-sama? He hesitantly said, his voice coming out coarse and throaty. Who poisoned you? It wasn't a how are you feeling, or similar health-related question. It was an honest, angry question that demanded answering. Naruto, for all the pain he felt in that moment, didn't want to answer that question. What need was there to answer? It wasn't as if there was proof, and Ayam had been kind to him. If she had changed recently, who was he to deny her the justice she deserved? It had been his fault all along. Don't know. You ate at Ichiraku's for lunch, the Hokage commented. Soon afterwards you fell ill after resting on a bench for a while. Naruto winced. Of course there probably was some sort of shinobi assigned to keep an eye out on him. It was the only thing that made sense of the entire ordeal. Who poisoned you, Naruto? If you already know, why are you asking? He mumbled calmly, closing his eyes. I did not wish to inflict more pain on you, Naruto. The man spoke with a tired voice, a loud sigh escaping the shinobi's lips. But, if there is no doubt, I will have Ayam checked by Yamanaka-san. And then the Hokage left, because in the hospital bed, tears were slowly falling down Naruto's face, and the Kyuubi, deep within his seal, just softly chuckled as he swished his tails around. Freedom would be his, and when that time would come, revenge, sweet revenge, would be ripe for plucking. Chapter 8. The Training of Souls. Naruto felt the burning of his muscles disappear after a few minutes, but as he cradled his right knee in an effort to stretch, he couldn't help but wonder just why they had deemed Shimura-san unfit for battle. The old cane-walking shinobi was a strict instructor. Since he hadn't been present the day before, even with a perfectly valid excuse, the man had doubled his hours of training. He was still nursing his tender legs when the snappish voice of the man came to his ears. Stand up, Naruto. He gritted his teeth, but complied. The pain was already gone, much to his surprise. He had expected to still feel it coursing through him, making him wobble or limp his way through the empty training ground. It wasn't meant to be that way apparently. Another run around the grounds. He knew that sometimes teachers gave strange instructions to their pupils, for some sort of secret or hidden purpose. As Naruto began to run, he thanked his lucky star that his kenjutsu teacher wasn't like that at all. Danzo explained why he gave him his exercise, rather than letting him figure it out on his own. The purpose of the exercise is to train with repeated motions the individual. No thinking is involved in doing squats, running around a field or lifting weights. Occupying time thinking why they are done is just a waste. Acknowledging their long and short-term benefits immediately is a key strategy to continuing them with determination. The man's reasoning was probably sound, but he wasn't going to ponder on it. He had been tasked with running, and so he ran. He had yet to touch the blade, but strangely it wasn't frustrating him at all. If anything, it relieved him. He knew that someone else would probably already be whining about how they should be fighting with swords, rather than run around in circles, but he trusted his sensei. How long does a battle between shinobi last, Naruto? Shimura asked as he passed by him during his lap. A good shinobi makes it last less than the blink of an eye, Shimura-sensei. Textbook answer, but the truth? Naruto bit his lip, trying to come up with an answer. When he failed, Shimura merely frowned for a split second, before answering. Good shinobi do not battle. They murder. They kill. They steal. Never should a good shinobi be seen as he kills. To engage battle in the front line is to not be a good shinobi. Samurais fight battles. Shinobi kill and murder. Through clenched teeth, Danzo spoke out the truths that all of his root members learned by heart. A root member lived in the darkness, grew in the darkness, and fought in the darkness. Their corpses littered the sewers, not the ground. Their faces gazed at the earth, not at the sky. Do you understand, Naruto? Yes, the boy replied. He was hesitant in saying that, and that much Danzo accepted. If he had been too eager, then the man would have known the message hadn't stuck. To send the boy outside of the village on any C rank was foolish and suicidal as he was in that moment. He could see the way the boy moved, the speed he attained, and the way his eyes seemed to travel rather than remain on their objective. His hands slightly tightened against his cane. If he had the power to do as he saw fit, he would deprogram the boy and reprogram him. He would break and close all of his tenketsu points, before reopening them after he learned how to crawl like a baby. Everything in the boy screamed self-taught, or wrongly learned. He didn't know whether to try and see what his jutsu repertoire was, but frankly if it was as pitiful as this. And this was the Jinchuriki, the weapon of Konoha, the supreme fighter that should be able to tide over a battlefield, no matter where he went. He wasn't complaining that the boy held a childhood. He was complaining that Hiruzen didn't keep a tighter watch over him. To Hiruzen, the boy had been poisoned by I Am Ichiraku, and the girl was awaiting trial and sentence in prison. To him, the Chunin Mizuki, spy of Orochimaru, had been trying and failing in poisoning Naruto for at least a couple of months. Whereas Hiruzen saw kindness in the Chunin's eyes for helping out a fellow orphan graduate, Danzo saw the truth. The man wanted the Jinchuriki outside, so that another team could extract him should he fail to kill him. The boy was foolish, and had no awareness of that which surrounded him. Had he been half the shinobi he was expected to be, he would have realized his food was poisoned. Yet the Kyuubi was apparently good at something, if it kept all but the most powerful poisons ineffective. He would teach a lesson to Naruto soon, the moment I Am would be sentenced to prison. He would teach him never to trust easily again. He was a shinobi. He was meant to be with shinobi. The boy was compliable and eager to please, that much hadn't changed. If anything, the loss of the civilian girl had increased his desire to be with others. He had seemed incredibly pleased to have his training hours doubled, and Danzo was sure that, had he asked, the boy would have been fine with doing nighttime training. This was the sort of eagerness the Yami of Shinobi realized was lacking in Root. The operatives obeyed, but they lacked the spirit. It probably was normal since he broke it out of them, but still. He gestured for the boy to stop by bringing up his only visibly sane hand. Shimura-sensei? The boy stilled, breathing hard to catch his breath. Tell me, Naruto, how is a man killed? The boy remained quiet for a moment. Danzo smirked slightly. He was trying to see how far the boy's mind could go. Naruto blinked once, before answering back calmly. He can bleed out. Then, he can suffocate. Then, you can stab him? That's no different than bleeding him out. You burn him? Correct. But not for the damage. A high percentage of burnt skin sends the body of the enemy into a state of shock. So the third answer is by himself. Another. Naruto frowned, his eyes closing for the effort. He imagined a shinobi. Slicing didn't work, smashing? Burning was out. Explosions and burns were the same thing. Poison? No. Poisons can either enlarge blood cells, thus bleeding out the subject, or cause reactions that either suffocate or kill the target through the use of his own body. Naruto kept his eyes close, a whine in the back of his throat as he racked his brain for an answer. Lack of blood. Lack of air. Lack of preparation. The lack of something is always a cause for death. To kill a man, you can easily take away his family, his friends, his lover and all that he holds dear. The man will then kill himself, since nothing holds any value for him anymore. Danzo spoke calmly, yet his only eye was settled on every single facial expression the boy is going through. Falling from great heights kills, but this fall on the lack of blood since you do bleed out, or die on impact. Excessive shock, removal of chakra and many more methods are available to kill a man. The how, however, usually never changes. Remove something, and the enemy dies. Do all shinobi have to kill? Ah, yes. Danzo acquiesced to the question. It is a required trait for jounin, but surprisingly not for chunin. Many shinobi never wield a shuriken or a kunai for more than practice or training, and the chunin exams usually shed blood, but not lives, along their way. But, C rank involves bandits? You will find Naruto that your jounin sensei will be more than able to intervene should he wish for it. Many prefer to kill in front of their genins, so that they grow accustomed to death, but not to the act of killing itself. It changes people, to kill someone, to snuff a life out of the world, to blow on a candle, to remove the chance for another being to walk the earth and redeem his actions, but sometimes, death is unavoidable to solve a conflict. Remember my words. When a conflict arises, the quicker it is put down the better it is for all parts involved. Killing others is the simplest way to go. Shimura-san, do you remember the first time you killed someone? Danzo frowned outwardly. Inside himself, he actually tried to recall the moment. It had been so long ago. Yes, he recalled. I was with my team. At the time there were 2 senseis for 6 genins. Especially during times of war it was useful to have numbers rather than stealth for the Loki missions. And nobody would have fought the first and the second Hokage together. And when the Nidaime had been the only one remaining, he too had a flee-on-sight order from the enemy. Naruto raptly listened, his mouth slightly ajar as he seemed extremely curious to gather some bits of Danzo's life in the shinobi ranks. The Yami of Shinobi supposed he could give away one of them, considering he had thousands to narrate. We had been scurrying the outer perimeter of the front lines, traveling from point to check on the fortifications and help in building them. During one checkup on a particularly unfinished bunker, we realized the work was hindered by enemy spies. While our senseis looked around the camp, we ended up helping build the bunker. Danzo took a small breath there. In that moment, the Kumobikyu shinobi, since we were at war with them during the first shinobi war, attacked. The Yami of shinobi remembered the explosions, the screams and the flashes of light as the enemy had disoriented the defenders before pressing forward. They had only miscalculated who was in the defenses. I would have died or been taken prisoner, had my sensei not come to our rescue. Yet I killed a few genins before they arrived to get us out of there, and I will always remember the feeling. Danzo shuddered, as he spoke then gravely. I had fallen on my back, in an unbecoming way for a shinobi. I was slashing in the air with my eyes closed and my body filled with spasms of fright and fear. The tip of the kunai nicked one of the veins on the neck of my assailer. Before he could come closer, his body fell on top of me, blood gushing out and drenching my face and my clothes. And that I will remember forever. Silence descended on the training field. Naruto didn't know what to say. His first kill had been a genjutsu. Did that make the experience any less real? It probably did. Enough of this, Shimura said. His only working hand went to the side of his cane, where he pushed a small and invisible button. There was a click, and the upper half of his cane gave way to reveal a small blade. Unsheath your blade. Naruto looked down to his side, to where his weapon was, and the cold feeling of metal settled on his chin. Never, ever, bring your eyes away from your opponent, Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the man a few steps away from him, the blade a few inches from his face. He gulped anxiously, before carefully finding where his blade was on the side and unsheathing it. The position of the blade on your body must be determined on the style you wish to use, Danzo remarked. The first few movements as you unsheathe determine your style, your first attack and the eventual success or defeat. Danzo's wrist flicked the blade so that it loosely resembled being sheathed on his side. He slowly swept it in front of him, changing the position with his wrist. By sweeping it, and changing the position of the blade at the same time, you increase the speed the blade travel, and thus the speed it cuts. However, even if you do wound your opponent, a swipe is far less deep than a stab. With that tanto, it is all about stabbing. To reiterate the argument, he moved the blade as if it was sheathed on his right side, rather than his left. He quickly flicked the sword with a wrist movement, and then pushed forward. Naruto blinked at the speed. If the blade had been charged with wind chakra, you would have died, Danzo calmly remarked. And so would have the opponent who decides to jump back rather than to the side. Slowly, Naruto saw the blade's side start to be covered with the blue substance that was chakra, somehow increasing its length. Raw chakra does not grant cutting power. Danzo seemed actually affronted by such a thing. It is wasteful, and the most you can obtain is, after long refinement, a slightly better blade than normal. Even with a fully fledged chakra blade, which is ordnance for any Jounin-level shinobi of Konoha, the benefits are far, far lower than expected. No chakra in the blade then? I did not say that. Danzo's sword slowly began to make a grinding noise, as the blue chakra was slowly but surely changed to a near-transparent azure one. This is wind chakra. Danzo flicked his wrist to the side, and the blade swept an arc that created a gash in the ground. And wind chakra cuts. Naruto's eyes could not grow any wider, and so the boy nodded in silence. Of course, chakra affinity exercises are something taught to chunins aiming for jounin rank, or taught by clans member to their children. Since you are neither, I cannot teach you how to generate wind chakra, nor how to find out your affinity or similar. What I can do is give you the control you will need to mold chakra outside of your body, and into the blade. Danzo walked slowly towards the nearest tree. Tree climbing is considered the first exercise to be taught to genins. By molding chakra into your feet, you can have them stick to the surface, denying gravity. Since every step must hold the correct amount of chakra, and since the feet are the most difficult part of the body to mold chakra in, it comes to reason that by doing so you learn valuable secondary skills like better chakra control and multitasking. Naruto nodded. Danzo frowned and then sighed. And that would be wrong. The blonde-haired boy blinked, as Danzo merely held his working hand open, its palm touching the bark of the tree. First things first, put your hand against the bark and let your chakra out of your palm. Naruto quickly obeyed, his hand resting on the trunk of the tree as he forced himself to let go of some of his chakra. The tree cracked and splintered near the spot he was touching, forcing Danzo to actually scold him. No, less chakra, considerably less. Naruto closed his eyes in concentration, slowly lowering the amount of chakra to what was but a mere trickle to him. It is a law of nature that chakra is within all living things, Danzo spoke calmly. Just as overwhelming amounts of water drown a plant, so too little will let the plant die of thirst. The correct amount is needed for the plant to prosper and the roots to grow strong. Silence descended in the clearing, as Naruto tried to move his palm who was cramping. He couldn't. He actually opened his eyes in surprise as he realized his hand was stuck to the bark of the tree. The hand is the easiest place to mold chakra, Danzo commented. Instead of wasting an entire day having you run up and down a tree, you can more easily find the correct amount by using your hands. You should now remain concentrated on the amount you're using, and try to bring it to your feet separately. I will be watching you from afar, do not delude me. Naruto nodded stiffly, the feeling of someone else having expectations for him settling on his shoulders like a weight. He felt something warm in his chest at the same time, the idea that someone actually would watch him train, that someone would expect him to do something. He was going to get the tree exercise down before the sun settled, or he would die trying. Meanwhile, Aoba was currently watching as his two genin went through the motions of the academy style. The style by itself was nothing complicated. It was a mere punch sweep aside the enemy attack punch again repeated and basing itself on the fact that the enemy would be as tall as the genin. Since in real life that wasn't the case, every jounin made the students hold some minor adjustments, teaching them how to correctly compensate for the enemy's height. Hit slightly higher, Sakura. Bend the elbow a bit more, Sai, he remarked. Not that much, he added to the boy, who perfected the movement without fault. The raven-haired boy was on par, so he turned his full attention to the pink-haired girl. Sakura? You're already short on breath? And no, sensei. You remember my words on shortcomings and honesty? The girl slumped down her shoulders, before shakily nodding. Yes, sensei, I'm tired. Are your muscles aching? Yeah, like hell. Aoba turned thoughtful for a moment, before checking the sky and then the girl once more. Did you eat lunch? Yes. And what, exactly, did you eat? The girl's gaze fell on the ground, as her arms clasped around herself in the usual position of someone who was trying to protect himself from harsh incoming words. Bamboo leaves, she mumbled, and the fact that nothing else came out made him sigh. How was it possible that some girls had the mental fortitude to survive the pain of hunger, and yet couldn't muster enough self-worth to understand that dieting didn't mean dying? Sigh. Could you please start running laps around the training ground? Yes, sensei. At least the boy understood, since he began running without hesitation. More likely he was simply uncaring of the entire situation, rather than interested in it. Sakura, he began. How long have you been deciding what to eat? He suspected her parents didn't know about this, because if they did and hadn't done anything, he'd have a couple of words with the Genin collocation program, which basically was the child services for shinobi. Sometimes it happened that parents accepted their children going to the academy, only to change their ideas once they saw them coming back from their first missions with scars. Or maybe they just changed idea midway through the term. So the abuse began. Yelling at your son or daughter about leaving the school was generally the last resort, but it was there too. The problem was that while dropouts existed, the procedure wasn't as easy and linear as it seemed. Konoha needed shinobi. So once one was enrolled, unless there were medical or psychological matters, the child had to continue training. Many children cracked under the pressure of their parents' disapproval, and of course quite a few of the adults preferred to blame the children, rather than put the blame on themselves for having settled the deal for their child in the first place. And so the Genin collocation program was born. It assigned one-room apartments just as if the Genin was an orphan, and a shinobi, actually drawn from a random list of people belonging to the torture and interrogation department, would go and talk with the parents in the meantime. No parents understood responsibility sooner than when they received notification for a meeting with Ibiki. Enko too was pretty much quick in getting the parents to understand the matter, if only because the parents then wished for their children to learn shinobi arts to defend them from the madwoman. A few days, she whispered back uncomfortably. He knew it was a lie from the way she averted her gaze. You know I'm in the torture and interrogation department, right? And that as your superior officer, hiding facts from me that might be noxious to the rest of the team is a punishable offense? The girl closed her eyes, before finally answering back. Years, since the third year of academy. One of my classmates said that her older sister went into a diet and caught her man in a few days, she whispered. I thought it would work with Sasuke-kun, but Sakura, boys do not mature emotionally like girls. You could be as thin as a needle and as attractive as a kunoichi from Nadeshiko village, but until they hit their teen years, boys do not see girls as love interests, and even then the time varies from boy to boy. The girl nodded, holding her tongue because she was probably trying to hold back her tears of shame. That said, where were your parents? You didn't drop dead somewhere in the middle of the academy, so I suppose they did feed you, didn't they? The girl opened her eyes again, before meekly whispering. They usually come back in the afternoon late enough for dinner. Her face morphed into a sad and bitter smile, Leftovers from the day go in the fridge, so I have breakfast the next. Which you don't eat, he ended her words, crossing his own arms in front of him. Sakura, I'm not going to tell you it's unhealthy, because it wouldn't change anything. A lot of people will either claim it's because you're screaming inside of you for attention, or maybe because you are generally ignored at home and seek comfort, but I'm not a lot of people, I'm your sensei. You're not a teenager girl, you're a kunoichi. I understand, sensei. I'll start eating then, she replied with a forceful smile that clearly told him she wouldn't. She would just try harder to hide it herself. No, you won't, he took a small breath. He knew how to break a person. He could easily make a grown-up bandit cry in a few hours. And albeit he wasn't a beaky because that man could get you to sing in less than 2 seconds, he knew he was good at his job. I will be talking with Naruto, sensei? Now the girl's face was brimmed with curiosity. What does Naruto have to do with me? You decided you would be his friend, didn't you? Sakura still didn't understand where the man was going with this. It simply didn't make any sense. So now I'll have to tell him how you'll be dead before you can even make chunin. Sensei? There was fear in the girl's voice, but fear only brought a person so far. You lasted 15 minutes training, Sakura. 15 minutes is not an acceptable time, not for these meager exercises. Sometimes you will be fighting for that same amount after having run for 7 miles in a single day. Sometimes you will be famishing because you haven't caught any game to eat. Sometimes you will find yourself doing great efforts to keep your teammates safe over long periods. And when those times will come, someone like you is guaranteed to die, or get his teammates killed. And all because you didn't want to eat. I don't want your excuses, Sakura, Aoba replied with his calm tone. I don't even want your word you'll eat. I know you won't. You'll go back home, you'll think about it, and then you won't eat. So I'll just prepare Naruto, who can count his friends on the fingers of his hand, and by hand I mean a single one, that he'll lose one. If I start now, maybe I can get him to avoid becoming too attached when you become too tired to parry a bandit's sword and are slashed midway. Or maybe I'll avoid him seeing you get captured, only to find your raped corpse a few days later. Sakura's face paled as her breath became uneven. Aoba could see the sweat already forming on her forehead, trickling down as her eyes turned teary. You have a choice, Sakura, either you eat or you don't. Either you are an effective kunoichi or you aren't. You're studious, so grab a book on healthy diets during your free time. But until then I just want to know what I have to tell Naruto. Will you die, Sakura? She shook her head strongly. You're dismissed for the day. And the girl ran. She ran as fast as she could out of the training ground. Aoba sighed in relief. The girl would eat. If not out of fear, out of guilt. If she still didn't, he'd call on the psychiatric imbecile who claimed the girl was fit for combat. Meanwhile, he'd warn her parents. This was what a sensei did, after all. At the same time, Kakashi's ears were whistling as he turned another page of his Ika Ika Fun Boob Fest. The silver-haired Jounin was currently watching his team try and gather the chickens from a farm near Konoha. Ami was standing in a corner, cheering up and sending winks at Kiba, who caught even the girl's share. Sasuke had already caught his deftly, and instead of helping out the Inuzuka was now grumpily looking at him. Did he expect solo training? He wasn't going to give the Uchiha what he wanted, not until he helped the others. He made a smile with his only eye, a mild genjutsu effect just for fun and to keep his chakra control untrained to its maximum. The boy didn't even realize it, probably took it for a quirk of the light or something, but simply scowled harder. This is useless, the boy muttered beneath his breath, something that a normal civilian wouldn't have caught, but he hadn't been in Umbu for nothing. He didn't answer, simply returning to hum as he turned the page. And the great Tsunade fondled the perky mounts of peachy flesh belonging to her beloved Suzuka, as the proud man-pig Zonzon watched with lust etched on his face. Sensei! Ami shrieked, that's lewd, You said something? Arg! Sensei! Kiba, why can't you be like Sasuke-kun? He already caught all his chickens. Kakashi sighed and returned to his book. Really, his ears were whistling pretty badly recently. He wondered why. At the same time, Naruto Uzumaki returned home sore and tired. He opened the door and stilled. He remembered closing it, so why had he but needed to push to open it? It was as if someone had unlocked it. Maybe it had been Shimura-san's words, but he quietly entered his apartment with a hand on his blade, held on his right side. A quick flick of the wrist, and he would be able to stab the enemy. He doubted there would be an enemy in his apartment. He was in the center of Konoha after all, but maybe a thief. What did a thief hope to find in his meager room? He looked around his room in surprise. There was no one. He frowned, before a slight creaking caught his ears. He turned to the sink, thinking that maybe his pipes had busted again. Above you. The Kyuubi's voice reached his ears, and the next moment he had jumped backwards, his eyes upwards to the ceiling. Just in time to avoid death by impaling, as a shinobi wielding a kunai dived down. The man was wearing a mask, unlike that of the Umbus as it was without animal symbols. He seemed to be wearing a large white trench coat, the type the Umbu used to hide their overall general appearances. Coupled with the mask, Naruto had no idea if he was facing an Umbu from an enemy village, someone from the village who played dress-up, or someone else entirely. What he knew was that he didn't want to stay there to find out. Tonight the demon dies, the voice mocked him, as it came out metallic and distorted. Well, Naruto, did you learn how to dodge? Naruto's rear was towards the sink in the kitchenette, but what mattered to the enemy shinobi was that he hadn't checked the gas tank used to light the fire. Said gas tank had in fact been tagged with an explosive note. The next moment, Naruto saw the man make a single hand sign. A flash of light from behind him soon followed with an explosion, as the heat mixed with the gas tore apart his room. He didn't see that. He didn't see that because as he had brought both his arms up to cover his face, the flames had washed over him, burning his skin and taking away his breath. How do you kill a man? The strength of the explosion sent him flying, landing with a sickening crunch against the other side of the wall. The flames began to feast on the walls then, burning through the room quickly as they neared his fallen body. Really? The QB grumbled. I thought better of you. It hurts. Want me to make the pain go away? The QB asked. Want me to help you? Please, just make it stop. No. Welcome to my world, Naruto Uzumaki. Welcome to a world where pleads go by unheard and unanswered. And then Naruto screamed as the flames nearly reached him. Nearly, because a snake made of ink appeared from the hallway, slithering its way to the gas pipe and closing it. It was soon followed by a slightly bigger lion, who reached him in less than a second, before eating him alive. The cool sensation of the ink did nothing to stop the pain he was feeling. Finally, he was brought outside by the lion of ink, which dropped him in front of a perplexed Sai before returning inside, to douse the flames he hoped. What happened? Sai asked. Enemy, shinobi. He managed to whisper back, before darkness claimed him once more. Sai left the place to the medics, who gave a quick glance at Naruto before bringing him quickly on the stretcher, and then running towards the hospital. The root shinobi looked back at the burned house and frowned. Danzo-sama's plan of getting the trust of the boy did not require burning down the boy's house with the boy within. It also did not require needless risks like the fire spreading. This had to be an external force, and if Naruto had said enemy shinobi then it meant there had to be an enemy shinobi. Thankfully, Danzo-sama's incredible planning had suggested he take up residence close to the boy, to observe him and intervene should the situation arise. Whoever the attacker was, he had been good enough to slip in through the Umbu's guard rotation over the Jinchuriki, a guard rotation of which the Hokage wasn't even wary of. This was all extremely strange. He had to report back to Danzo-sama, after dealing with the Chunin guards who were now asking him questions. He wondered how he should answer to the question, "Are you a friend?" for a moment before making his smile, which he now hoped was genuinely good to pass off as real, and answering back, "I am his teammate." That was a good enough definition for the moment. Chapter 9. Talking with one's father. The white ceiling of the hospital was starting to grow on Naruto. If his entire body wasn't flaring with pain, he would have even begun to enjoy the room's flowery smell. He scrunched his face in an effort to sniff the air once more. Yes, it seemed there was a different smell from the usual antiseptic one. Grumbling and wincing for the sore flesh that was reknitting beneath the bandages, he turned to look at his bed desk. Some pretty-looking flowers, with white delicate petals, were held inside a vase of plastic. It was actually a touching thing. Somebody had brought him flowers. He wondered if it might have been the Hokage, or maybe his sensei. He supposed Shimura-san had been warned by now, considering that from the window he could see the sun settling. The window was slightly ajar, as if somebody had walked in and out. He tried to sit, but his back seemed to be held in a viscous and jelly-like substance. Moving apparently was a big no-no, as he cried out in pain as if the thing was actively trying to tear apart the skin from his back. He groaned as he looked back at the ceiling of the hospital. He had nearly died. Then again, it was only a matter of time, wasn't it? He mumbled. It always is with you mortals. The voice of the QB filtered in his ears, as if he was just whispering to him close by. You always die. That is a constant in the world. Naruto just breathed, refusing to answer anything back to the demon in his stomach. If he ignored it, it might go away or at least stop talking to him. The door slowly slid open 5 minutes later, as a woman walked in with natural grace. She was wearing a nurse outfit, but her purple hair and the way she moved told a different story. You have woken up? Good, she said, taking a few steps to check at his medical chart. Do you remember what happened? He frowned. There had been a masked man fire some words on dodging? Not much, he couldn't remember much. Hurts. His brain decided to croak out. Second and third degree burns do that. The nurse's tone seemed sympathetic. We are keeping your back in a gelatin solution to avoid further damage as your skin heals. You were lucky you survived. The woman moved slowly to the window, before closing it shut tight. She muttered something beneath her breath that sounded awfully like a Kakashi, before turning back to him. You told one of your teammates about enemy shinobi on the scene, right? Naruto closed his eyes, trying to recall. He did seem to remember Sai. Had the boy saved him? Why was he there in the first place? The hour was a bit late for a visit, maybe he was just passing by. Nothing happens by coincidence, Kurama grumbled, his voice filled with some twinge of amusement. Yes, he murmured. There was someone with a mask. He had baggy clothes. He asked if I learned how to dodge. I see, the woman nodded, before turning to leave after leaving the medical chart back at the base of the bed. Depending on how fast you heal, you might leave in a couple of weeks. He winced. A couple of weeks? Skin needs time to regrow. The woman then left, closing the door behind her. He sighed before moving his hands over his chest, raggedly breathing as he tried to sleep again. There wasn't anything else he could do, was there? He found himself walking through the sewers once more, his gaze landing on the cubies formed behind the bars. The eyes of the Ninetales were slightly narrow, but not in anger at him, more like in a softer tone, as if he was simply deluded with him. Well, in the hospital again. It's not like I like being in here, Naruto muttered back, looking around as he took in the dingy state of things. The pipes were rusty and leaky, as they ran across the walls all around them. The water was knee-deep, and while there wasn't actually a smell, he couldn't help but think that it clearly had to stink, being in a sewer and all. Me neither, but we can't choose our jails now, can we? The fox retorted, before flicking one of its tails. Between the giant bars, a shogi platform appeared. Thankfully I can stave off boredom. I don't know about you though, Naruto blinked. You play shogi? Kurama huffed. I don't like it, but I can't go outside and stretch my legs now, can I? So I have to make do with what I have. But who taught you how to play? What? You think that as a construct of chakra, I should be an ignorant mass of hatred and evil, pooled together only to be used as a chakra battery by the first imbecile that comes around? I didn't say that, he replied quickly, bringing both of his arms up in an attempt to assuage the fox's irritation. It's just, you're the Kyuubi, and you are a human, Kurama said. That clearly marks you as an inferior and stupid individual then? No. But you're a giant fox. Who'd teach you how to play shogi? My father, perhaps? The fox whispered. My grandfather? My mother? My grandmother? I was born out of chakra, but that does not make me an orphan. Your so-called sage of the six paths, the mythological first shinobi, is none other than my grandfather. Will you read of this in your books? No, of course not. The Kyuubi chuckled at the last words, shaking his head slowly. You aren't lying, are you? Naruto croaked out, as he took a careful step forward. He was just curious to look at the shogi board after all. No, I'm not. I don't need to lie to hurt people. I don't need to crush you beneath my fangs to destroy you. I am the most feared of Bijus not because of my power, but because of what I truly am. Silence fell in the sewer-like environment, as the Kyuubi's tails lazily moved around. Demons should be drowned, a female voice hissed from one of the pipes. A shinobi him? Let's hope he dies. A man's voice came from a dark corner of the room, filled with hatred and anger. Maybe I could slice his neck tonight, if only the Hokage hadn't ordered not to. A cooler voice, more controlled, came from beneath the water. Without parents as he is, no doubt he grew up wicked. Probably his parents left him on purpose. Who'd love a monster like him? He could imagine who the owner of that voice was. Ami's tone was easily recognizable. Die, a voice filled in from the ceiling. Die. 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 Multiple voices roared through the chamber, and then it was silence once more. Only the shaking and tear-stricken Naruto remained in the middle of the room, under the watchful gaze of the Kyuubi, the Ninetales. I cannot die, Naruto Uzumaki, but do you know why? There was amusement now in his voice. I am the product of malice and hatred, that which comes in abundance from you mortals. I do not control the sand like the Ichibi. I do not give orders to insects like the Nanabi. I am not a creature of strength like the Hachibi, but I am the Kyuubi, and malice and hatred? Those are everywhere and in every heart, and as long as they'll exist, I will too. The fox seemed to stand, stretching his body behind his cage. Every man hates. Some hate pickles, others hate children. Some hate their wives, who betrayed them, while others wish to kill an innocent boy saddled with a weight he did not ask for. You see, Naruto, the Kyuubi's voice seemed confidential, by then. Your thoughts are filled with hatred too, you just refuse to acknowledge them. He shook his head, bringing his hands to his ears as the thoughts struck him like a tidal wave. Stop staring at me! One of his tiny voices squeaked. Leave me alone! Another whined, but soon those voices were drowned by others, more angry and far more deep in their tone. They should all just die. The water bubbled as the voice spoke with determination. Plucking their eyes out might stop the stares, a voice suggested with malice. Maybe if we killed their parents, they would stop calling us unloved orphans. A third voice, hateful but gleeful, filled the air with her wicked mirth. Why can't they just all burn? No! He screamed. That's not. I didn't mean it. The Kyuubi just chuckled with mirth. I know, he said, as the voices disappeared slowly into a low murmur. I know you did not mean it, but for how long, I wonder, will you not mean it? How long will you go on believing them the truth? How long will you sacrifice yourself for the sake of others to whom you owe nothing? How long will you live as a slave to the whims of this village? I'll get to Chunin, then I can leave. I'll ask for a long-term mission, then go out, hide somewhere. A shackle born of fear is no different than one born of hatred, the Kyuubi commented wistfully. And what if you can't? What if they don't let you leave? What if they don't let you live? Then I'll become strong, and then I'll escape. We should have him sealed after Chunin, Hiruzen, a female voice grumbled from a pipe. We cannot let him leave and risk the Kyuubi to the outside, a male voice countered. We could use the Hyuga's seal. Hiruzen, you have to realize it. We can't let him go around unchecked. The female voice remarked haughtily. He had his childhood, now act like the Hokage you are. The male voice spoke then. Think of the village. Think of what would happen if the Jinchuriki were to leave, and whose fault would it be? Hiruzen's, the Hokage's voice, came in filled with such a thin tone of venom that even Naruto shuddered at it. You think it's fair? No. I will not have him branded like cattle. One day, Hiruzen, there will be another Hokage in that chair, the female voice spoke slowly. When that day will come, I hope the Jinchuriki will still be in Konoha. Otherwise you will have given your successor the task of fighting the fourth shinobi war. Leave me Koharu, Hamura, and don't show yourself in front of me again for a while. You both disgust me. The Kyuubi just chuckled again, showing his pearly white fangs to him. Well, shackles are shackles, but does it even matter in the end? A prisoner is a prisoner, whereas it is made of chakra or of flesh. Sealed or branded changes nothing. Hokage-sama said he wouldn't do it. He exclaimed back at the bijou. Yes, he wouldn't, but what of his successor? He'd choose a good one. One who wouldn't do it. He hesitated. What did he know of who was going to be chosen as a successor? Fuinjutsu is a difficult art, the Kyuubi remarked. It takes considerable skill to master, something you do not possess. The Uzumaki were famed for their seal knowledge, and yet the Hokage used the Shinigami itself to seal me. Do you know why? Naruto shook his head, as he began to look for an exit. He didn't want to remain there a second more, because as I spoke to him of his sins, as I narrated the hatred of others to him, he was so shaken he nearly dropped the child he was carrying in his arms. Mom, when is Dad coming back home? A child's voice asked with fear. Uncle? Where is Dad? Daddy isn't coming? Mom? Mom, where are you? My parents didn't die. They were strong. M.O.M. Dad. Don't leave me. The Kyuubi then laughed. He laughed as the water that surrounded them grew to reach his stomach. You humans always think yourself so powerful, so tall and mighty, so masterfully prepared for everything, the crimson eyes of Kurama shone. But you forget yourself. You forget that everything has a consequence. That everything has a price. You forget that no matter what you do, you are evil within. That is my purpose in the world. That is what the sage entrusted me with. Sinless people do not exist, and I am the harbinger of their destruction. I am the Kyuubi, born of hatred and malice to bring forth the rightful retribution. So answer me this, Naruto Uzumaki. Do you really believe, truly from the bottom of your heart, that you will ever be free? And Naruto closed his eyes and clenched his fists. He would never be free, would he? Hunted, sought out, chained, branded, a weapon, a Jinchuriki, but when would he be a free man? When? Can you free me? Everything has a price, the Kyuubi whispered to him. Remove the seal, and you will have what you desire. He looked at the seal and bit his lip, as the water rose once more, to the point where he could easily float towards it to break it away. He paddled towards it, his right hand gently moving to grasp it at the corner. He was about to yank it out, to remove the scrap of paper, when a strong hand stopped him on the spot. The Yandame Hokage narrowed his cerulean eyes on him, before turning to gaze at the Kyubi. Kyubi, he hissed. Minato, Kurama replied calmly. We were just done talking about you. Take your child somewhere else, and tell him of the joys of being a slave to Konoha, would you? I grow tired of this. The water level dropped in an instant, but just as they were about to leave, the Kyubi gave out one more call, and asked him of his mother. He will enjoy the revelation, trust me. Then with a bark of laughter, the Kyubi resumed his shogi moves. Naruto found himself in a featureless room, with white walls and a white ceiling. Only the Yandame stood there in front of him, clad in his attire and his cloak with the flame symbols on the lower end of his mantle. His eyes were narrowed, but more in a sort of examination of him than in anger. Naruto? He murmured. Why? Naruto's throat bubbled up. He was staring at the fourth Hokage, the man who had sealed the Kyubi in his gut, and if the Kyubi was to be believed, this was his father. His father was the Yandame, and there was no way the Sandame hadn't known. There was no way people hadn't known. Why did nobody tell him? He felt tears prickle his eyes as he unleashed what were years of bottled-up emotions because of that single question. Why? You have no idea, do you? He screamed back at him. Have you any idea what I had to go through? I was left alone, people hated me, people still hate me, and all I've got is the Kyubi telling me the truth. The Kyubi is the only one who does. Where does that leave me, huh? I didn't even know you were my dad. I don't even know my mother's name. He choked on his spit as he kept on talking. I'm stared at, glared at, one of the few who didn't die because of me. I've got no one who cares. I've been living alone all this time and all I get is a why. Well, Dad, why not? Why did you have to do this? Why couldn't you just leave me alone? No! He screamed back. I don't want to know. My life was hell, and all you have to say is why. Just no. He began to sob, crossing his arms over his chest. I don't want the Kyubi. If he wants to go, let him go. I don't care. I don't care about Konoha. I don't care about the villagers. I just want to be free from their stares. Naruto, the Yandame's voice was stern now. You are no longer a child. Act like I never was a child. He screamed once more. So no. No and no. Go drown in a ramen bowl for what I care. You weren't there. You can't know. You wanted them to call me a hero? Guess what? I was called demon or monster, never hero. The most I got out of a happy day, when I could remain at home with no one staring at me, glaring at me, or talking to me. I tried to be happy. I tried to make them see me, and they just glared back. And you know what? He muttered, breathing hard. The Kyubi's right. Every man is evil, Dad. He snorted the last word out as if it was an insult. And Konoha's filled with it. I'm glad the Kyubi got down to burning it, and I'm just sad he didn't succeed. The slap echoed through the room as his father gazed at him with anger. Shut up, he hissed, as Naruto's hand went to hold on to his burning cheek. You're angry, and I understand that. I'm sorry things turned out this way. I'm sorry you had to deal with all of that. But you can't just go and spout that nonsense. The Yandame seemed positively heated up as he spoke next. I had wished for you to be seen as a hero. But if this happened, then I understand your anger, he muttered, shaking his head slowly. But your anger does not excuse your words. Should you wish the death of innocent children in their cradles? Are the ones who actually cherish you worthy of being killed? Are the kids who are growing up and know no better really the culprit of their parents' words? You can't fault everyone, Naruto. You can't, but they can, right? They can just give me the fault for everything and be done with it, he snorted back. They can come up and call me demon and monster, tell me I killed their families and then move on like nothing ever happened. I should just forgive them, right? Maybe I should become Hokage, protect them all, so they might in their hypocrisy come to say I always believed in you, Naruto, or well done, son. I'm proud of you. Well, no. The answer is no. I'm not a scapegoat for their anger. They won't see me ever again, if I get my say on things. I don't care about Konoha, Dad. I did, once, and I tried hard, but they took away from me one of the few people who loved me for what I was. They destroyed what little I had, so no, Father, I will not forgive them. Never. Minato breathed in slowly, before putting a hand on Naruto's shoulder. I'm sorry, he murmured. I know this is hard. Heck, I didn't expect this. I thought that I'd meet you in a pinch, maybe when somebody else tried to remove the Kyubi and help you out. I didn't think I'd meet you so soon, driven by desperation and anger. I'm sorry, Naruto. His eyes grew soft and half-closed, as he muttered, and I know that saying sorry never works. I know it all too well. Naruto bit his lips. His first instinct had been to skive away from the touch of his father, but he was his father. It was the first time he was talking to him. The first time he was seeing him, and he didn't want to miss it. He would eventually wake up, and maybe he would never see him again, so really, he didn't want to leave. His head cooled down as he turned his eyes once more to those of his father. It's not all right, he muttered before hugging his father. It's not right. I know, the Yondaime whispered, hugging him back. I know. He could feel his father's finger caressing his locks of hair, before chuckling grimly. You have my hair. Your mother must be furious about it. It was indomitable. Naruto froze. Mom's dead, he whispered. Minato murmured back. When? When did that happen? He asked, slightly alarmed. She died during the Kyuubi assault, Naruto said, perplexed. I've been living in the orphanage since I was born, Dad. No, she didn't. Minato choked out. She couldn't. She wanted to, but I stopped her. I knocked her out before she could try anything as stupid as resealing the Kyuubi in her. I know she was alive when I died, I know it. But, even if she did die afterwards, he murmured, what about Jiraiya? Tsunade? Kakashi? Heck, what of Orochimaru? Who? He blinked. Jiraiya was my sensei. Tsunade was part of your mother's family. They were cousins or something. Kakashi was my student, the only one who survived the war. Even Orochimaru would have been enough in a pinch. They should have given you a shinobi to protect you, after telling everyone you were the hero who held the Kyuubi. At least they should have given you some shinobi to guard you from the enemy villages. Not drop you at the orphanage. I didn't have anyone. I'm living alone in my apartment. Never heard of. All right, Minato muttered, shaking his head once more. This is worse than I thought. I understand why the Kyuubi was laughing back there. It's no wonder you're angry, but, he closed his eyes. I'm just a leftover chakra of the Yondaime, Naruto. I won't remain here for long, so there is something you need to know. I thought Sensei would have already told you of your heritage, but if he isn't around, do I have some inheritance? Naruto asked with curiosity, trying to change the argument. I mean, cup ramen is nice, but, no, I'm afraid not. Minato made a bitter smile at that. The Hokage's nothing more than an administration job at best, and a figurehead at worst. The pay was nice and stable, but nothing to splurge on. The house we had was destroyed when the Kyuubi attacked, and the little we had in our accounts was probably taken to repair Konoha, as is the case with dead shinobi who have no family left. We did our best to keep you a secret, since as my son you would have been subjected to attacks from enemy shinobi. All right, Naruto shrugged. So what is it? When you have the time, son, reach for my head on the Hokage's mountain. There should be a small rock near one of my locks. Smear your blood over it, and it should morph into a wooden box. Take the box and open it someplace safe. It contains a cache of soldier's pills and one of my Hiraishin kunais. You'll teach me the Hiraishin? No, the Yondaime's reply was quick, and filled with vehemence. I don't have the time, and it is extremely complicated to even get started on it. The important thing is that you take the kunai and bring it to the Konoha cemetery. There should be a tomb to a certain Rin there. We never recovered the body, so I had it dug out as another cache of equipment. The kunai opens the seals that surround it, and the coffin should hold enough of a selection of supplies to help you out as a shinobi. There is where the Hiraishin scroll is held. Minato's voice grew stern in that instant. Listen to me well, Naruto. The Hiraishin is not easy. It is not as simple as merely sending forth a kunai and hopping to it. It requires perfect chakra control, enormous amounts of chakra, and an overall extremely well-developed knowledge of the human body. Writing down the Fuinjutsu part is actually the easy thing, and with the kunai you have it wouldn't require much. Now I want you to swear to me you will not abuse this knowledge. I did not create the Hiraishin as a technique for war, but as one to always be close to the people I cherished. He chuckled, as his gaze seemed to glaze over some old memory. Strange, isn't it? I was a mama's boy and found a way to talk with her even when out during missions. Next thing I know it's an S-rank technique only I can teach. Not many can get it down too, and the 3 bodyguards I had always followed my lead with it. Minato chuckled at that, before his eyes softened even more. Well, there's no need to swear to me now that I think about it. You'll do what you believe is right. Only please, don't blame the innocents for it. Not everyone is a culprit. He sighed. And many times, people believe themselves right even when they're wrong. It happens to the best of us, trust me. Naruto swallowed heavily, before looking at his father with tears in his eyes. Will I see you again, Dad? Minato just smiled, and then gently ruffled Naruto's head. Not until a long, long time. Do your best, Naruto. I'm sorry I left you with this burden. I'm sorry you had to deal with all of this. And even if sorry does not cut it, even if I could go back and change things, I wouldn't. Because there is a reason I gave you the QB, Naruto. And not just to protect Konoha. He whispered the last part in the boy's ear, as he moved in for one last hug. Be wary of the Uchiha. Kill them if the choice is to be made. Leave none alive. Whatever happens, do not trust any of them, ever, and don't trust the QB. He might be a prisoner against his will, but that does not make him any less dangerous or sinless. Then the Yondaime Hokage departed from that hug, and as he slowly faded away, he whispered a few last words. And tell Kakashi that if Kushina could see him, he'd kill him for having dropped off the radar with you. Wait! Naruto exclaimed, bringing his right arm forward. I have more questions. What about my mom? Who was? But the Yondaime had already disappeared, leaving Naruto to slowly open his bleak eyes because of the morning sun. That, and because the Sandaime Hokage was standing right there, pipe in his mouth, looking at him with a worried look. Naruto, Hokage-sama, he whispered back. The question was on the tip of his tongue, the dreaded question of where is my mother? Already there, already prepared, and yet he stilled. Did he really want to ask the man who was bound to know? The man who knew whom he was the son of, and yet had said nothing? He couldn't bring himself to. The nurse told me you were assaulted by an enemy shinobi, the Hokage began hesitantly. Do you remember anything important about him? Naruto shook his head, as the obvious questions were moved out of the way quickly. Hokage-sama, can I ask you a question? He whispered, locking his cerulean eyes with those of the Sandaime. If I had not wanted to be a shinobi, would you have forced me to become one? The Sandaime blinked, raising one of his eyebrows in surprise before schooling his features. I wouldn't have. Your successor would, right? He queried then. Successor? Are you already thinking I'm too old to rule, Naruto? There was a light smile on the man's lips. And what brought this on? I heard people talk, he replied. A man and a woman, they talked about a successor for you, someone who would brand me or something like that. Do I need a tattoo of sorts? Somehow, the fact that the Sandaime did not display anything told him he had hit the nerve. The paralysis of the man's face couldn't be associated with much else. No, Naruto, he whispered. You will not, never in fact, be branded. Don't worry, I'll see that those who talked are told not to meddle. Thank you, Hokage-sama, he replied. When can I leave? The nurse told you a few weeks, the Hokage commented. Naruto just breathed in calmly, before he heard a slight chuckle to his ears. He frowned as he felt the skin behind his back close up as if it had never been hurt to begin with. What you had to learn you did, didn't you? The QB taunted him through the question, making him wince as he slowly stood up. It no longer felt as if his skin was being pulled off, albeit it felt kind of disgusting now, what with the cold sensation of a jelly-like substance on his back. I'm fine, Hokage-sama, he said to the wizened Sandaime. I've got something good out of the bad deal the Yondaime gave me. He patted on his stomach as an afterthought. Hiruzen's pipe was in the man's mouth before long, puffing out smoke as the old shinobi nodded. I see, I'll have you discharged then. If you hurry you can even reach the Hokage Tower before the mission hours begin, and by tonight I should have found you a new apartment. There will be no need for that, Hokage-sama. Another voice, familiar to Naruto, rang in the room. Danzo Shimura walked in, heavily bandaged as he was, with a small smile on his face. I was just coming to visit, but now that I'm hearing this, I do have more than one free room in my house. As his Kenjutsu sensei, I say he has but to benefit from it. Hiruzen's hold on his pipe clenched slightly, as the man narrowed his eyes on the other one. Shimura-san, you shouldn't exert yourself too much. You are grievously wounded after all. Nothing lethal, Hokage-sama, and nothing that can prevent me from offering a room to a homeless shinobi for the time being, the Yami of Shinobi retorted with a small smile. Even then, Hiruzen retorted. There is a problem. What, pray tell, would it be? Danzo mocked ignorance, as he looked towards Naruto who was simply listening in while biting his lower lip. Naruto has not said yes. The two elders stared at one another for a moment, before they both turned to look at the boy who shrunk at being the target of attention. It's fine, if I'm not a bother, the boy hurriedly whispered back, in a squeaky voice as he grasped tightly onto the sheets of his bed. Then the problem is solved, Danzo grinned gently. I'll have the room prepared. And with those words, the Yami of Shinobi left the room. At the same time, Sakura Haruno was faced with a dilemma, as she stood in front of the fridge of her house. Her parents were there, so she couldn't skip on breakfast, but still, she didn't know whether or not try and not eat all the same. It was a force of habit after all, wasn't it? Her mother was actually smiling at her kindly, as she placed the breakfast in front of her. What was she going to do with it? Eat it all? Eat it a bit? She flinched as the words of her sensei barreled back into her head. Hesitantly, she picked up the chopsticks. Well, if she ate more, then she could try and train more, and afterwards she would lose more weight because of it, right? Worse to worse, she might even try as Ino did, the 2 fingers down the throat method. She didn't know why her parents were looking at her with a condescending attitude, but it puzzled and annoyed her all the same. They were going to be late in opening their shop. Why were they still hanging around? It was as she finished breakfast and left, that a stray thought occurred to her. What if they had been told? What if they had been told and were now looking out for her? She swallowed thickly. She felt bloated, her stomach feeling full and all too heavy for her. She was going to put up weight if this continued, and she couldn't. Just how did Ino manage to pass by her parents' eyes? She even had a shinobi father. It should have been more difficult. As she reached for the Hokage Tower in the morning, her thoughts went to Naruto. Their sensei had told them he was still in the hospital. How the boy managed to get hurt on a daily basis eluded her, but maybe he was just clumsy by nature. Why did he even try and become a shinobi then, if all that he did was fall on his own kunai? She frowned. That was a bad thought to have about a teammate. Sai had barely managed to save him from a fire, and he had been badly burned. She hadn't visited him yet, but since he probably had weeks of prog, and there he was. Sakura blinked as she calmly brought up her right hand in a fist and closed the distance to him in a second. Naruto! She screeched, making him wince as he nearly jumped away. What are you doing out of the hospital? Was the boy mad to begin with? Sakura, he replied, his voice low as always. That made her self-conscious, terribly so, of how high she had been screaming at him. Now she was embarrassed. I was discharged, but Sai said you had weeks of prognosis. Sakura retorted, looking at him with a slight worry in her eyes. You didn't skive off, did you? Was it a small burn? I didn't think Sai would blow things out of proportion, but you do seem fine. I'm fine, he whispered back. Really, it was nothing big. Naruto? Their sensei arrived a few seconds later, Sai in tow. The man frowned, but as Naruto seemed fine, he did not pry. Aoba knew when to ask and when not to, and he doubted they would have released him from the hospital unless he was fine. I've been discharged early, sensei. Naruto commented, his gaze down on the ground. I can train. The implicit meaning was I can work, and Aoba heard it clearly. He said nothing as he walked in the tower, merely nodding in understanding to the black-haired boy. He supposed he would have to get used to it. The D-rank of the day turned out to be nothing more than weed pulling, from the garden of an elderly lady who seemed more than content in just sitting down on a wooden and creaky chair and snapping out at them for being slow. Careful with the flowers, brat. She screeched at Naruto for the 17th time. Sakura's forehead was already sporting a tick mark, which seemed to only be exacerbated by the fact that there wasn't a flower at all near the weeds Naruto was pulling. She didn't know how Naruto could stand it, or their sensei for what it mattered. Aoba sensei just seemed to be watching over them, with his arms crossed in front of him, and enjoying the shade of a tree. They were the ones sweating, and Naruto was actually given the worst part of the garden, the one with the bushy thorns. She bit her lip at another reprimand from the elderly woman, tightening her fists as she was just about to tear out a pink and crimson flower from the ground, rather than the nearby weed. She didn't, because she half suspected the woman would give the fault to Naruto to begin with. Pat harder the soil. You're doing a really shoddy work. Shut up, Sakura mouthed with her lips, her eyes twitching. She had barely whispered it, so the old woman hadn't heard. Grab those thorns and remove their roots, boy. Don't cut them, or they'll just grow up again. Shut up, she whispered again as she gave a quick gaze to where Naruto was currently busy with ninja wire? Well, considering he was the only one the woman hadn't given gloves to, his hands were a mess of dirt and dried blood, but he hadn't even screamed once. Tetsuya, Naruto suddenly said as he removed a root. Crushed. His eyes turned to look at the old woman, who seemed to have been paling under his simple words. Makoto, impaled. He snarled. Kazuki, internal bleeding. Naruto, their sensei suddenly pulled himself out of the shadow of the tree, moving closer to the boy who wasn't done. Takeo, found dead beneath the rubble 5 days later, he said, his tone frosty and his eyes cold. Sakura realized her body was shivering as the woman gave out a choked croak. You call me monster and curse my name, he stated. But you are the one filled with malice, not me. He turned his gaze to their sensei, and then smiled slightly. Sorry, sensei. She was annoying. Aoba said nothing as the black-haired boy returned to his duty. The silence that descended in the small back garden was now deafening, as even Sai had stopped to listen. A few seconds later, and the dark-haired emotionless genin resumed his duties. Sakura just blinked once more, and then decided to finish it quickly. What was that all about? Naruto, meanwhile, was becoming the subject of a one-sided conversation. You see? She quieted down, the Kyuubi remarked, his voice smooth and at ease. A bit of fear can go a long way, Naruto. He uprooted another thorn bush, using the ninja wire as a sort of executioner's knot. You could use fire chakra to burn it all, Kurama suggested, once more whispering in his ears. Or you could just give up and leave the old hag. He winced. I'm trying to work here, he mouthed back. You know, when you think it comes through the pipes all distorted and really difficult to hear. Was the Kyuubi actually chuckling as he spoke? He was starting to grow more and more estranged with the idea that the Ninetales could be, well, as evil as portrayed, but maybe that was the beast's purpose, considering it was seeking a way out. Still, the Kyuubi had told him of the Yondaime, hadn't he? And the beast had yet to lie. Oh! Now you're making my heart, hardened by centuries of evil and humanity, melt, the Kyuubi cooed with a surprisingly well-placed female voice. You know, being a mass of construct I am genderless, and malice comes from males and females equally so. I suppose I could try and appear as a beautiful female next time around, maybe naked, with enormous breasts and 9 bushy tails. You'd dig that, wouldn't you? He stammered and nearly yelped out loud as he drove his fist through one of the thorn bushes. He ground his teeth as he pulled the hand out, the slight wounds closing in a matter of seconds. Ah, the beauty of hormones, the Kyuubi chuckled with his voice back to the male tone. I should have tried that, if only you would have found out about me a few years from now. I suppose you'd have believed it as nothing more than a sexy wet dream. A pity that couldn't work out. We're done, Aoba-sensei exclaimed after a few more minutes of work. The elderly woman merely nodded with her mouth still ajar, albeit she now kept her distance from Naruto, as the trio of genins left. Naruto, what did you do? They were midway through the street back to the Hokage office to report, when Sakura could hold her curiosity back no longer. I memorized the casualties from the Kyuubi attack. Naruto's face was blank as he spoke. Since they insist on reminding me of what I am, I remind them of who they lost. One of the two sides will have to yield eventually, and I am the shinobi. I can withstand the pain. He murmured the last part as if it was an afterthought, but that still didn't stop Sakura from hearing it. Her gaze softened at those words, before she decided to shake her head slightly. I'm sorry, she said. I wanted her to shut up, but I didn't say anything. It doesn't matter, Naruto replied with a tired tone. I'm used to it. It does matter, and it doesn't mean anything that you're used to it. She chided back at him, huffing. We're friends, right? All right, he stammered out, perplexity etched on his face as she merely smiled back and nodded. Even Sai can be our friend, right, Sai? Sai actually blinked, his mouth slightly open in surprise. He nodded with actual vigor too, before blurting out, Yes, ugly. Sha! Sakura's fist was halfway in the air, when she stilled it and took a deep breath. She dropped it limply back to her side, before narrowing her eyes on the boy. Maybe you need a trial period, she muttered. I slipped my tongue, Cherry, he amended. Good, keep it that way. She scoffed before returning her gaze forward, and blushing at the surprised face of their sensei, who seemed to be smiling slightly. Well, that's an improvement. And with those words, Aoba began to walk again towards the Hokage Tower. He just wondered if the other sensei's team had finally developed those bonds that Konoha was famous for earlier than him, since after all he was just the sensei of Team 13, and he wasn't on par with the Exumbu Hatake or the son of the Sandaime. 3 jounins, namely Kakashi Hatake, who was keeping at bay Kiba from murdering Sasuke, Asuma Sarutobi, who was actually smoking a cigarette while the blonde-haired Kunoichi of his team hit on the head his 2 shinobi, and Kurina Yuhi, who was trying to talk out of her shell Hinata, and thus missed completely Shino's attempts at having his bugs devour his other teammate for having crushed a Kikaichu, sneezed at the same time. Maybe he could get his team a C rank, maybe next time. Chapter 10. Scattering the Misconceptions. Shimura-san's house was somber. It looked new, as if it had been bought recently. The stone-gray walls and the slanted dark brown rooftop gave it an earthly feel of lusterless that made her perfectly in tone with Naruto's sensei's usual talk. The garden was trimmed and cared for, a cobblestone path paving the way from the fence to the door. The wooden door held a brass circle as a knocker, while the windows were all of the secured type, meaning they couldn't be completely opened. The only interesting thing was a statue in the backyard, depicting a sort of mix between an anteater and a tuskless boar, if Naruto had to guess. He didn't want to pry what the creature was meant to represent, and since he was already intruding in the house of another shinobi, he didn't want to be a bother. Still, being literally home-trained in kenjutsu by the old shinobi was already yielding some results, if he could say so. He was now able to unsheath his blade fast enough to be worth the genin rank, or something like that. It was high praise, at least for his knowledge on Shimura's handling of compliments. That morning, his eyes rested on the Hokage's crinkled face as the old man bit on his pipe, while scurrying through the missions assigned. The window of the room was open, and a cool breeze was settling in, showing the beginning of the month of September. "Hokage-sama?" Aoba-sensei began. "My team is ready for a C rank." All three of them blinked, their eyes moving for a second to their sensei, before turning back to the Hokage who just huffed and nodded. "Iruka?" He turned to the Chunin sensei, who nodded back and scurried through the pile. "We have two, Hokage-sama. Escort mission to Wave or guarding a merchant caravan to Tanzaku town?" "The escort mission would be preferable," Aoba remarked calmly. "Tanzaku is further away and it's hot bandit season. With the cold months coming around, they're all preparing themselves to stash supplies. My genin need experience, but there is a difference between challenging them and trying to murder them." "Who placed that mission on a C-rank roster during this time of the year?" "I think it was Mizuki," Iruka muttered, actually widening his eyes at the Jounin's words. The three genin all simply waited in silence, Sakura barely containing her excitement on going on a C-rank mission. "Warn him to recheck his submitted scrolls for rank registration once more next time," the Hokage pointed out, before acknowledging Team 13 for the escort mission. "Your client will be notified and in wait of you in front of the gates of Konoha within 2 hours. The mission should barely have more than the occasional encounter, if at all. The client is transporting through sealed scrolls, wood, and construction equipment bought in Konoha stores, so you will help him unpack once arrived at destination. The mission is not classified as urgent. As such, it can be annulled in case of wounded, maimed, or otherwise killed shinobi within your team. Should such thing happen, you will of course not be paid. Should you encounter enemy missing, mean you are not to engage unless provoked. You are genin, not specialized umbu. Should you encounter foreign shinobi, Aoba Yamashiro is authorized to report back following procedure, and nothing more. Should any of you go against the above-mentioned words, you will be placed on probation and face an inquiry to determine the reasons for your actions. You are to maintain a cool but respectable facade with the client at all time. There will be no talking of Konoha's techniques, no training in Konoha-only styles or mention of Konoha's defenses while outside the village and within earshot of the client or foreign individuals unless permission is granted from your commanding officer." Iruka breathed deeply after that long-winded sentence. This is the general guideline all shinobi leaving Konoha for the first time are asked to acknowledge and understand. The scroll contains all the information that has been asked by the Shinobi Office Bureau to the client. You are authorized to inquire on the mission's specific details with your sensei, or ask your client. It is left to your discretion whether to bend the mission's demands by providing more services than demanded or considerably less, but a happy client is one who leaves a bonus. Then the Chunin sat down wheezing, pulling out a bottle of water and drinking avidly from it. "With all due respect, Hokage-sama, the next rookie team is yours to brief. Youngsters these days," the Hokage scoffed as he dismissed Aoba's team. The moment Naruto was outside, he let out a tired sigh and murmured, "We can have it done while Naruto is out of the village. He will find out, Hokage-sama." Iruka grimaced, his eyes looking out to the window. "She has confessed trying to poison Naruto with muriatic acid and various cocktails of cyanide, peach seeds and arsenic, even going as far as using rattlesnake poison once. There is simply no other choice, Iruka. We can keep the information away from Naruto, however, as long as he doesn't ask, and he isn't going to, if I understand him." "Yeah, about that, Hokage-sama," Iruka murmured, his eyes downcast. "Is it the right thing to do, sending him out of Konoha so soon with that emotional baggage?" "A shinobi must learn to kill his emotions in time of need," the Hokage replied. "It is a lesson we must all learn by ourselves, unfortunately." Naruto's back was tightly secured and ready within mere minutes, and so as always he found himself sitting in front of the meditation garden that Shimura-san had built within the house's internal garden. He didn't know if having stones and smaller stones in strange patterns actually meant something, but he had to admit it was nice. "It is an ensemble of rocks," the Kyubi growled. "I have seen mountains of these things. I probably could make a pretty one with a marble cave too." Naruto internally rolled his eyes. Kurama spoke to him when he had something to tell that would probably shatter his entire view on something usually, Other times, he supposed the fox was simply bored of being in a sewer paw deep in water with nobody to talk to. They should calm the spirit and all, but I think it's just the human who believes in it that makes it work. If you don't believe, then they're only rocks. If you believe, then they can be rotten fishes for all you'll care, you'll still feel relaxed. Naruto's nose twitched as the smell of brown leaf tea floated near him. He had come to associate that smell to Shimura's presence, and as such he didn't even tense as he felt someone sit down next to him. Trying to meditate before your first C rank? Naruto didn't even bother to ask how he knew. He just answered back, "Yeah, we'll be going to the land of waves." He opened his eyes, staring at the bandaged face of his teacher next to him. "It shouldn't be difficult, but I can't help but be nervous." "To be nervous is to be attentive of one's surroundings," Shimura replied calmly. "But do not let nervousness become paranoia. To see enemies in the shadows requires a keen eye, but to see smoke all that one need is to be filled with distress. So I should be careful, but not overly so? A good shinobi knows the correct amount of suspicion to use, no matter where or with whom." Naruto bit his lip, before asking in a meek voice, "What if something goes wrong?" "Then it will," Danzo replied smoothly. "No mission is guaranteed to be as easy as written, but foolish is the shinobi who does not expect the worst, prepare for the worst possible thing and has a plan for a suicidal situation." "You're speaking like Aoba-sensei, Shimura-sensei," Naruto replied, his lips quirking upward in a slight grin. "I better go, or I'll be late. I will not tell you not to worry, or that the mission will be simple. I will not tell you good luck or something similar," Danzo spoke gravely. "All that I have to say is this, Naruto, you have your training. Remember it." "Yes, Shimura-sensei." Konoha's gates held a small office box right next to them, where usually a pair of chunin stood more for bureaucratic purposes than outright guard duty. The honor of protecting the gate was reserved to Anbu, hidden either in plain sight as civilians taking a stroll, or in the shadows ready to strike at a moment's notice. Aoba-sensei was already signing off the documents that would tell at what hour and with which members his team departed from the village, and just as he turned around he was pleasantly surprised to find Naruto. The boy had arrived just in time. Now all they were missing was the client. "Naruto! You nearly got here late," Sakura hissed at him. The boy just gave a nervous smile back, before answering, "I'm sorry, Shimura-sensei was home. I think he heard I was leaving and went away from the shop to see me off." Naruto mumbled, his eyes softening at the thought. He might buy a souvenir from Wave for the old shinobi. Maybe he'd like some tea leaves? He dropped his bag on the floor and began to check its contents. He had 2 kunai, a band of ninja wire, a dozen of shuriken and a pocket knife within. Wrapped in thick plastic wraps was a change of clothes, so that even if he did end up in a blizzard or ended up wet from a sudden rain he'd have a dry change. He also lifted slightly the 2 flasks of water, both heavy and thus filled, and secured the third to his belt. Leaving Konoha didn't only mean a more dangerous mission, it also meant more things to check for. He had tasteless protein bars, a small pouch filled with coffee sweets in case a mixture of caffeine and sugar was needed to stave off sleep. That had been Shimura-sensei's suggestion. Naruto hated coffee, it was bitter. He also had a flask of alcohol and 2 pints of oil. In case the wood wasn't dry and the fire needed something to start with, he also had been given a few sticks of coal from Shimura-sensei. He actually wondered if the man hadn't been fretting too much with him. It was as if he expected this mission to suddenly last years within enemy territory, with no one able to help. They were going with their Jounin sensei. The man was meant to know his stuff. Sai's and Sakura's bag contained pretty much the same things, albeit Sai also brought out 3 soldier pills. Naruto's eyebrows rose exponentially. Those were pretty costly, and seeing them reminded him of the Yondame's secret stash. He had yet to even go near it. First off, he wasn't sure he'd manage to get it without alerting someone, and if there really was the Hiration technique, he no doubt would have to part with it so that Konoha could add it to its library. It might be a bit of a spoiled kid act, but that was his father's technique, which meant it was his too, not of Konoha. "Cherry Dickless, are you prepared?" Sai asked with a hint of. Was that actually a worried tone? Naruto's ears twitched, as he looked at Sai's face, which had a light frown. "I hope so," Sakura mumbled, biting her lower lip. She double-checked her stuff again, before finally putting her bag back on her shoulders. "Aoba-sensei, what's our client like?" "He should be a gray-haired man in his 60s, dark eyes and a worker's build." Aoba's reply was curt and to the point. "Remember, you are not actually forced to engage and terminate the hostiles. Defend the target, and if bandits attack I will take care of them. Your priority is the target's life, not bounties on missing Nin's heads or the likes." "Yes, sensei," they chorused, as their eyes soon scanned through the crowd. A half-drunk man stammered towards them, taking a swig of sake before bringing up his left arm. "I'm the awesome super bridge builder Tazuna," he exclaimed cheerfully. "Have you seen the super ninja team assigned to me for the mission?" "We are, Tazuna-san," Aoba remarked calmly without an inflection in his voice. The man gave a curious glance at them, as if scrutinizing his escorts, before huffing. "I hope Pinky there pulls her weight. She's a bit scrawny to be a ninja." The look of hurt on Sakura's face was soon met with a light snarl from Naruto's own. Sai's subtler attempt at intimidation was missed, albeit the boy had brought his right hand to the tanto's handle, slightly narrowing his eyes. Sure, Cherry was annoying, and she clearly wasn't meant to be a kunoichi in the first place, but he, a trained shinobi, was the one who could insult her, not a civilian. "I would kindly advise not to insult your escorts," Aoba softly spoke, his gaze freezing Naruto on the spot. It was that sort of cold and deadly gaze that hinted all sorts of pain to be given if he as much as tried to make a single move to wring the neck of the client. "They have decided to lay their lives in defense of the village since the moment they donned their forehead protectors. All of them are adequately prepared and ready for this mission. I trust them implicitly to do the right thing." Sakura puffed her chest out at those words, while Sai seemingly relaxed. Aoba said nothing, but his right eye did twitch when Naruto stared from him to the client again, his eyes cold and his gaze transfixed on Tazuna's neck. He had no doubt Danzo Shimura had told the boy where to strike in case he wanted to make a kill, and Naruto was starting to move off the charts he had built on him. He had expected an introverted to gently bring out of his shell, hoping to smother the hatred and anger he might feel. He hadn't expected the egg to start cracking already. Unless he acted, he had no doubt the boy would do something stupid, like charging at an enemy to show his emotions. Repressing them like that was never healthy. But he knew he couldn't do a miracle like with Sakura. He didn't know what strings to pull with Naruto, because the boy had literally none. He took offered food with distaste but also with disgust towards himself for being weak. He refused to be the one to initiate a conversation with a stranger, and he seemed to be double-checking the distance between Tazuna and Sakura repeatedly. He was even slightly tensing every time the civilian brought up his sake bottle to take a swig, as apparently his elbow moved too close to Sakura's side for his ease. The fact he did the very same motions for Sai just told him what he believed the man to be, an enemy. "They gave me kids, how am I going to get them to help me with Gato? The man is going to drown Wave if this keeps up." The Kyuubi whispered in Naruto's ears, revealing to him the horrible truth of the matter. The man had lied on the mission rank, and he was guiding his team to death. He hired missing Nin. "I hope their sensei can protect me," Kurama chuckled as he added that last part. He normally wouldn't trust all the fox said at face value, but did he really have a reason to lie? He was keeping his eyes on the man's back, and if what the fox said was true, he'd stab the bastard himself to get the missing Nins off his team. Sure, maybe Sai called him dickless rather than Naruto, but there wasn't malice in his words. He could have called him Blue Eyes or Thing, and it would still come out with the same tone. He knew some boys called each other nicknames that held offensive words, like Kiba was dog breath to Hibachi. Sakura had told him she was his friend. That was the first time anyone had actually said that out loud. Didn't matter, he was actually without a clue on what to do with a friend. He wasn't going to let a friend down, no matter what. As much as these sickening sweet thoughts are entertaining, the Kyuubi drawled out as their march proceeded smoothly. "I have a proposition." Naruto rolled his eyes, but still made a silent throat verse, as if to hum a tune. "I will heal you, if you survive your battles with your enemy, in exchange for freedom to be given just a few seconds before your death." Naruto frowned. The fox wasn't going to help him in battle, but he was going to heal him afterwards if he didn't die. And if he knew there was no hope, then all he'd have to do would be to rip apart the seal and go out after bringing back the Kyuubi. Still, would the Kyuubi attack Konoha? "I can swear I won't attack Konoha at my freedom," Naruto actually imagined Kurama rolling its eyes. "And even if I did, I suppose you would still be there to stop me, considering you're an Uzumaki." The raven-haired boy just snorted silently. "We'll set an ambush further down the road." A male guttural voice reached his ears. "Having shinobi won't protect the man. Shouldn't we tell Zabuza-san?" The other voice whispered. He knew they weren't actually whispering near him. It was the fox. The malice that condensed into chakra whispered to his ears the evil thoughts of people, and he knew the fox was doing this to rile him up. He was wondering how Kurama intended to make him respect his own side of the deal, if he accepted it. It wasn't as if he could do something now, could. A sickening flare of pain nearly made him buckle over as his stomach seemed to have been torn apart by 1,000 of scorching steel needles. "I can make you feel the worst kind of pain for quite a while," the Kyuubi whispered softly. "The seal will contain me, and I will not kill you, but my chakra is corrosive by nature, and I can give it to you in its highest form. I can deliver through your chakra pathways such levels of corruptions that would make you hope for the sweet release of death. I don't, because I am frankly not all that eager to go through the effort, but do not think that me being imprisoned means me being powerless to have my revenge, should you break our deal. All right, he whispered softly. All right, you said something, Dickless? Sai asked, having probably picked up his words. No, nothing, Sai. Naruto replied. I say we aim for the girl first, one of the missing neens hissed. She looks fresh. Brother, you are disgusting, the other retorted angrily. We get the man, and that's all. We already have Kiri, you really want to add the Konoha neens to our equation. Doesn't Tazuna have a daughter? He does have one. The Kyuubi's whispers lowered themselves to nothing more than meek murmurs, leaving Naruto's blood to boil slowly. Aoba Yamashiro was quietly eyeing his genins, seeing how they worked their way through their first escort mission. The sun was high and warm, and there probably wasn't going to be a cloud for the entire trip, at least until they reached the land of waves. It spoke well of the mission. That lasted until he heard the rustling of branches coming from the trees to his left. His eyes narrowed and his gaze went to the treetops. There, hidden behind a few leaves of foliage, were two shinobi with slashed Kirigikyo forehead protectors. He tensed slightly as he kept his gaze on the two of them, subtly telling them he had seen them. The two looked back at him pointedly, before pointing to his client. This was actually common courtesy. Missing neens rarely wished to fight shinobis of other villages, as many times underground work was provided by them. Many shinobi took up missions that went directly against their home village, or that were to be done in their village's lands, so that they would not risk making more enemies. No use increasing one's own bounty more than necessary after all. Generally the low-ranked shinobi would then disappear, to prepare an eventual ambush or assassination attempt for the client, taking care not to damage or harm the shinobi of the actual village unless, of course, they were sporting the same non-forehead protector. The other village shinobi also turned a blind eye to the missing neens, rather than seek confrontation. Why waste time, effort and equipment on collateral, when one had a more important mission? The two chunins actually didn't expect the jounin to still, and then turned on the man he was supposed to be escorting. Meizu and Goza stood in the trees quietly, already planning their retreat since the jounin had seen them, when they watched a surprising scene. They both brought their eyebrows up at the sight of the Konoha jounin gesture for them to come down. That surprised them. Of course they weren't stupid enough to do it, but it didn't mean they weren't curious. It was Meizu who suddenly muttered a surprised of course before actually jumping down of the tree and moving closer to the group. Goza cursed his brother, but followed. He lied about the mission parameter. Meizu spoke gruffly, actually addressing the Konoha shinobi who had tensed at their arrival. The little stain did it, didn't he? You lot ain't chunins, right? No, they aren't. I am a jounin, however, so don't get any strange ideas about my genins, Aoba remarked curtly, before gazing at the now shivering in fright Tazuna. Tazuna-san, did you know you were being targeted by enemy shinobi or not? It is a simple question to answer. I didn't know. He knows Gato has us on the payroll, Meizu snarled back. We intimidated him plenty, his daughter's such a nice girl too. You leave Tsunami out of this, the old man yelled back. Gato won't stop the people of Wave from rising back against him. Tazuna then turned to the jounin. Please, you have to help us. If you don't, we'll. Tazuna-san, Aoba spoke calmly. Did you know shinobi would be out for you? Tazuna looked torn, before he made a quick nod. If I had told, they would have increased the cost of the mission. There just wasn't enough money. You lied on the mission parameters, but we're super poor. We barely could scrap by the materials and the cost for this mission. Gato's killing us. You can't. Zabuza of the Hidden Mist is our chief, Meizu supplied smoothly. If that isn't enough, that boosts the mission to A rank immediately, Aoba snarled. Now his eyes were angrily set on Tazuna. Did you know of one of the swordsmen of the mist being our enemy, Tazuna-san? Tazuna's hands clenched and distended, as the man's eyes snapped shut before giving one curt nod. Please, we'll pay you back anything you wish. We'll pay you hundreds or thousands, as long as the bridge is built. Wave can. Law 9 is clear in the Shinobi Code, Aoba spoke. Should the client infringe upon his side of the deal by lying concerning the parameters of the mission, in such a way that would put at risk a shinobi unprepared, he is to be dealt with upon discovery for acts of treason against the hidden village of Konoha. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw Tazuna take a step back. Please! I have a nephew, and a daughter, and they'll hate Konoha for life if I die. And the people of Wave, they'll. You have lied and admitted doing so on the mission parameters. A Yamanaka will extract this memory from my brain and confirm it. The shinobi code is clear. The kunai flew faster than Naruto could see, and in an instant Tazuna's head rolled on the ground as the blood sprayed around them. I take it there is no need for confrontation, Aoba replied smoothly. There isn't. The two Chunins were quick to nod. We'll take our leave then. Always a pleasure doing business with Konoha. Need anything in Wave Area? We'll be there for a while. You just need to ask. I'll tell the higher-ups. And then the two Chunins ran back on the trees, disappearing from sight. Aoba turned to look at his genin, finding two of them pale beyond their wits and covered in smudges of blood and one emotionless looking even bored about the entire ordeal. Somehow, he had no doubt Sai would be unfazed by this. Sakura and Naruto on the other hand, the girl just stared. She stared at the now headless body with tremors running through her body. She gulped down anxiously, before falling on her knees to the side and retching on the grass, her hands clawing at the ground as she began to sob. Naruto instead just looked. He looked at the body with a mixture of disgust and self-loathing, something that actually made Aoba think. What did the boy have to give himself the fault of? It wasn't him who had written the shinobi code, and unless he had known about Tazuna's lie, which he doubted, since he too couldn't actually read the mind of people, there was little he could have done. Maybe it was just some sort of saving people thing he had? No, everything went against that theory. The boy was introverted and didn't trust quickly. He probably was disgusted that the man had lied, and was accusing himself of not having seen it sooner to prevent Sakura from seeing it. He doubted there was anything romantic in that night in Shining Armor Field, but if there was he'd curb it out with time. Sakura was a kunoichi and he was a shinobi. Sure, they were teammates, but that meant they had to complement and support one another, not protect the weak link. Sakura, can you stand? He asked calmly. Oh God, oh God, you killed him, Sakura whispered trembling. You just killed him. Protocol 9, Harino Sakura, isn't taught in school. Someone most certainly had to have asked why it isn't even written on the school book in your class. There's always a book smart who asks. What did your Chunin-sensei say when queried? Sakura knew the answer. Always the smart girl, she had been the one to actually ask that question, and she couldn't help but feel a sting of anger at her naive self who wished for praise. Really, she didn't want to know in that way. We would learn it on the field, she whispered hoarsely. He also said we shouldn't hope to know it soon. Exactly, Aoba nodded, taking out a scroll and unrolling it. Tazuna's corpse was soon placed within the seal, and as it was closed and snapped shut with a red ribbon, Naruto looked positively sick. Every jounin is assigned 3 of these scrolls when taking on a genin team, he spoke calmly. And every jounin generally wishes he will never have to use them for his students. This mission is over. We will be paid for a day's duty, while the village takes care of warning the family of what has transpired. Was there no other way? Naruto asked softly, as his arms went to help Sakura back up, to stand on her feet. Protocol 9 was always given leeway, since it is sometimes hard to discern between willingly hiding facts or happen chance. Sometimes a group of people you define as bandits might be A-rank jounins hiding themselves as such. A civilian would know no better, of course, but since this was a pretty clear-cut case, there was only one possible end. Since the war with the Wagakure and the Kyuubi's rampage on Konoha, here Naruto winced hard, Protocol 9 has become stricter. We can't lose shinobi to high-ranked mission they are unprepared for. I see, Naruto mumbled. But what about his country? It doesn't matter, Aoba replied. If the problem will trouble the land of fire, the daimyo will send a request to the village. If it doesn't, then it is not our business unless the daimyo of Wave pays us. We are not tasked with meddling with other countries' inner turmoil, especially if shinobi are hired for it, and I will not risk your lives for this. Do you understand me? There was silence for a moment, before Naruto meekly nodded. Good, then let's get back. We will reach Konoha by nightfall. In the meantime. Aoba's right thumb went up as the jounin bit onto it, making a strange set of hand signs before slamming his right hand on the ground. There was a small puff of smoke mixed with black feathers, and the next instant a crow appeared on the ground. The crow held a strange mailbag strapped to his shoulders, empty, but probably able to safely carry small packages. Tengu? Tengu. The crow cawed, flapping its wings. Tengu, yes, you're Tengu, Aoba sighed as he took the scroll with Tazuna's body. He grasped a brush, before writing a black 9 upon the surface of the scroll. Deliver this back to Konoha, Torture and Interrogation Department. The crow cawed before turning its glinting black eyes around, as the scroll was hoisted in his backpack. Flapping its wings fast, the beast took to the skies in a moment, flying away. We can start going back then. The puddle of blood that belonged to Tazuna remained behind, drying beneath the rays of the sun. Sakura gave hesitant glances back at the pool, before biting her lip and proceeding together with her team. She couldn't help but keep on hearing the old man's words, and really, was a lie worth a life? The man had lied, but did they really have to execute him on the spot? Couldn't they come to a deal of sorts, like sending another team? Sai remained unfazed. The Hokage would probably be told of the event and then look into the matter. Should there be a risk or a potential benefit for Konoha, the leader of the village would send a small group of Anbu to oversee what needed to be done. If the swordsman of the mist proved to be valuable, he would be taken in and then used as an exchange token with Kiri for some of the forgotten behind enemy lines shinobi. That was the reason the liars were executed. It sent a clear message that Konoha wouldn't deal with such a thing, while secretly it might or might not do it all the same. Of course, only the daimyo would be notified, and only once Konoha's reward was already secured in some form or the other. Naruto remained quiet, so quiet that Aoba was starting to think he had shocked the boy out of his wits. It took a moment for him to understand that the boy was actually mumbling something, and that the something was a question for him. Am I a horrible person, sensei? Naruto? I wished him dead for how he acted. Am I a horrible person if I'm not sad he died? If I don't care about his nephew or daughter? Am I evil? No, Aoba answered, shaking his head. You're just human. Naruto grimaced. I'm not just human though. Naruto, you want to tell your teammates? Aoba inquired, giving a gaze over to Sakura and Sai, who both seemed unfazed by the boy's words, but Sakura's facial expressions were giving off the wrong vibes. It wasn't curiosity, but fear. Fear as if she already knew. Sai, on the other hand, was as emotionless as a brick wall. Sometimes he wondered if the boy had been given emotion training, maybe his private teacher? Sakura already knows, Naruto said. Sai, I'm the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Oh, the dark-haired boy replied. That doesn't change the fact you're without a dick? Naruto snorted at that, barely repressing a slight twitch of his lips that would have turned into a grin, had he let it go. Sensei, I think mine has to be one of the worst secrets to ever been held as such in the history of Konoha, the boy retorted. It was in a surprisingly awkward silence that the rest of the trip reached its end, and as they neared the gates of Konoha, a small group had already formed. A small group of civilians, to be more precise. Sensei? Sakura whispered in surprise. They seemed to be waiting for someone, and as their group neared the civilians who saw them stirred and called the others, pointing at them. Naruto stopped. He stopped even before they passed through the gates, a few meters away from the wide wooden doors. You monster! A voice screeched as soon as they stepped within the village. Sakura stilled and turned back, to where Naruto had stopped, and then back to where the civilian in question, an old woman in her 80s, had screamed, pointing at the boy. You hadn't taken enough, did you? Madam, what is going on? Aoba-sensei asked as he neared the old woman, who was frantically trying to claw her way to where Naruto was. The Chunin guards were holding her back, as one of the two, Kotetsu if she wasn't wrong, was at the same time gesturing something from above. Was the sweetest girl ever. A loud voice, coming from a young teenager, screamed in the small crowd. And now she's dead because of him. Sakura frowned. The name was familiar, why? She turned to gaze at Naruto, only to find him frozen in shock. His eyes were like those of a frightened rabbit, one who he is just about to take flight. I didn't, he stammered out. You fucking demon! A woman in her 50s spat out, spitting in Naruto's direction. The third was kind not to smother you in your crib, that's what. You did this. No, just go and die. Die. You haven't taken enough of us, have you? We'll have our revenge. I hope you die, Sakura. Sigh. Take Naruto back to Shimura-san's home. When her sensei barked the order, Sakura finally snapped out of her shocked stillness. So she went right back out to where Naruto had stopped, grabbed him by the hand, and yanked him to follow her. She tightened a grip on his hand as the boy seemed to be looking down in silence. She pressed her lips thinly one against the other as she passed by the screams and the curses sent their way, with Sai in tow. One of the civilians actually flung a rotten tomato in their way, but Sai was fast and cut it in midair. It's all right, she tried to sound cheerful. Everything's going to be fine. I am's dead, he whispered hoarse. I'm the one who. No, you didn't, Sakura snapped back at him. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. No. I told them. She was poisoning me, I confessed. She was imprisoned, but Naruto. Sakura's eyes softened as she looked at the downcast and trembling form of the once blonde boy. He had even begun to sniffle a bit. Then she blinked. Wait, She poisoned you? Ah, yes, but… And you knew and said nothing? Sakura's cheeks filled with air, before she grasped Naruto by both sides of his jacket and began to throttle him. You baka! You don't keep quiet about this. She got what she deserved, that's what. No! Naruto snapped back. Sakura, really, no. His tone was soft as Sakura stopped holding him, looking into his eyes for some sort of reason. I mean, I killed her father. She had the right to do it. What bullshit is this now? You didn't kill anyone. You can't become a shinobi if you're a murderer, you know? Which was ironic, considering what a shinobi did, and especially since they started the academy at the young age of 6. Still, that was in the law. Naruto just swallowed thickly, keeping his gaze low. Naruto, it's my fault, he said. There's nothing else to add. They're right. I just destroyed a family, happy me, huh? Killed them both. Killed them both. I'm sure Shimura-san is going to be proud of me, yeah, really proud. He sarcastically whispered. I'll end up killing him too. I suppose that's all I'm good at. Sakura closed her eyes and took a deep breath, before slamming her right hand in a punch straight against Naruto's face. You baka! She grasped him again, before slamming the boy on the ground and starting to hit him on the chest with her fists. You stupid idiot! That's not true! That's not true at all, Sai whispered as his right hand stopped the girl's fist. We need to go. We're attracting attention. The girl stifled a sob as she stood back up. Naruto frowned. Had the girl been tearing up for him now? You're not at fault. Not for this. Not for anything like this. Understood? She whispered, narrowing her watery eyes at him. And if you, she sniffled, if you think something like this again, then I'll hit you like I hit Sai again. Got it? Why? Naruto whispered the question out as if it weighed like lead, his throat parched. Because I care, stupid. I'm the team leader after all. She pushed her chest upwards. Cherry, who voted you team leader? Well, you're horrible with people and Naruto is a bit shy, so I'm the leader, Shinaro. The girl huffed. You're ugly. I should be team leader. I am the Shinaro. Another fist flew, and a crater with Sai formed on the street. Naruto stared at his female teammate huffing and sporting a twitchy grin on her face, as she looked awfully amused at hitting Sai again. The boy just stared at the scene for a moment more, with Sakura ranting at Sai and the other boy replying in such a way that the pink-haired kunoichi slammed him back in the crater more often than not. Eventually, he cracked a grin. The grin turned into a smile, and then he chuckled, even as the salty tears tasted awfully bitter on his tongue. He couldn't help but laugh at his teammates' antics. The two actually looked flustered at hearing him laugh. Even Sai had his eyes wide. Sakura was the second one to giggle, probably because the scene hit her in its entirety. Sai was the last, and more than laughing he just moved his head to the side and brought up an eyebrow, but just for an instant the twitch of his lips moved to a small smile, so quick it had seemed nothing more than an illusion. But it had been there. Naruto sighed that night, as he was in his bed. He kept his eyes closed, as a memory surfaced from the depths of his mind. He had been 6. He had been hungry, and he had money. People didn't like him, but he didn't let that pull him down. He'd smile and laugh and look around. He was going to become a shinobi at the academy, so he wasn't going to be afraid. He was a very brave boy for going around the village, even more so when people just didn't look at him. Some were very rude and knocked him down without saying they were sorry, but he ignored those bastards. He had just decided to go back home, when a nice and enticing smell had caught his nose. That had been the moment he had walked into Ichiraku's ramen stall. That had been the first day he had eaten ramen, the first day he had met people who had smiled at him, rather than glare. That had been, really, a wonderful day, and so Naruto fell asleep, while just one floor below Shimura Danzo finished penning the latest orders for his route operatives to smuggle the cargo out of Konoha. Beneath the bandage, his right eye bled as usual. It would do so for a week, as it was the norm when he used it. The girl had confessed without fault, no lie or deceit had been seen by the Hyuga, and nothing could be said to disprove it. The stall vendor hadn't really poisoned the Jinchuriki, no. Mizuki had, not alone, he couldn't have done that alone, and the girl had been the scapegoat. The poison had been applied to the chopsticks the boy used to eat, not the broth. The tip of the chopsticks had been repeatedly coated and soaked into poisons of ever-increasing variety. Merely looking at the dead cats in the back alley would have told the truth weeks earlier, just around the time Mizuki had left his girlfriend to start dating the stall vendor. Rude operatives had of course disposed of both cats and poisoned chopsticks, just like they would now dispose of certain dead weight. Mizuki had run its course. It was time to change his objective. The Haruno girl had civilian parents, prone to accidents. If he cut that off, he could get the girl to stick to her teammates. Emotions and bonds were weak things. His mind suddenly gave him an insightful idea. One that would make the boy under his care graduate from root training all the same. If he brought the boy under his fold, and then revealed to the girl that he had killed her parents, and if he managed to get Orochimaru to play along, a small smile formed on the lips of the Yami of Shinobi. Konoha would get his deadly and emotionless operative soon, of that. He'd make sure personally. The malice that filtered through the shinobi's chakra condensed into spirals, as it slowly merged with the Kyuubi like 1,000 of others did at the same time. The giant nine-tailed fox simply grinned. One might say that knowing the opponent's deals beforehand was cheating, but in life cheating didn't exist, and it was his job after all, to destroy, to cleanse and to purify. The sage of the six paths had been many things, but unfortunately he had believed too much in the world itself. Humanity was not made of saints and heroes. Chakra was not used to help other people, but learned as a mean to kill more. Shinobi were not saviors, but angels of death. Ah, the irony! His grandfather would surely destroy the shinobi world himself, had he still been alive. Since he wasn't, that work fell to him, and his brothers and sisters, if he got them to cooperate.